Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our board meeting. We apologize for starting a few minutes late for those of you that were waiting. We had the honor this evening of recognizing our retirees for the year. And it's always a great time to celebrate their tremendous achievements for our district, for our students and staff as well. The board started the meeting at 4:30 and went into executive session. We're now beginning the public session of our meeting. So I ask that you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight, as we begin our meeting, I want to remind everybody what our, the reason that we are all doing what we do for our district, and that is our mission and vision statement. Our mission is to create a culture of academic excellence through inclusive and innovative learning opportunities for the whole child. And our vision is to empower all learners to reach their full potential in a globally competitive world. As we move into the meeting, I need approval for I need a motion for the approval of the agenda, which includes addendum for personnel consent agenda 1 F and H, 2 Q and R, 3 B, C, and D, and item number 5 to include the Montgomery teachers, Olivia Overbeck and Brittany Dollard.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Weber?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. I need a motion for the approval of the minutes.
So moved. Second.
Any comments, corrections, additions from the board? Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye, our minutes are approved. Thank you. Our first item of business tonight is our presentation on the Sycamore Culture and Climate Survey. Mr. Lewis?
Yeah, it's always exciting when we get a gift of feedback. And as part of our strategic plan, we set out to do a culture and climate survey to inform us not only about areas that I think we are doing well, but also areas where we can improve. And I always commend our team, including the board, that have a continuous improvement mindset about our school districts. So it is my pleasure to welcome our colleague, Phil Herman from the Impact Group to give you a presentation tonight about those results and answer.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Good evening, members of the Board of Education, Mrs. Weber. Thanks for having me here tonight. I'll tell you what, you've got a very friendly school district. I was in the parking lot and I had pulled in, parked, was looking at my phone to make sure that I knew what entrance I was supposed to go in at the high school. And there was a little knock on my window. And I look over and it was a 4 or 5 year old who had just gotten out of the car next to me and jumped up onto my running board and was knocking on my window to wave hi. And his sister yanked him off the running board, so lectured him. But it was a really warm welcome as he was his family was on his way in for one of the events you have going on. So I appreciated that. It's wonderful to be back with all of you. Thanks for having me. I was a school administrator for 22 years and the superintendent for 11. And I used to ask the staff when I was superintendent, do we want our students to breathe a sigh of relief when they walk into our building, or do we want them to breathe a sigh of relief when they walk out of our building? We talk about that for a minute. We hope that we were creating the environment, the climate and culture where our students would breathe a sigh of relief when they got into our buildings, that they knew that they were coming to spaces where they could be themselves, that they were comfortable being who they are, and that they knew that they were in a safe, comfortable learning environment. In order to do that, we all had to be models of that type of behavior. And so I really commend you for identifying it in your strategic plan, that your culture and climate is important and that you want to measure it. And we're grateful to be a part of that. So for tonight's presentation, I'm really going to provide an overview of the 5 different surveys that we conducted. Talk a little bit about the analysis procedures. Ultimately, share some of the quantitative and qualitative data examples. Share a few of the survey highlights of some things that we noticed at the impact group about the survey that we had or the surveys that we had analyzed. Share some identified opportunities and share some guiding questions. And tonight is not intended to be all-encompassing sharing of all the data from all the surveys. It would not be possible. There were 5 surveys and they ranged in length from 46 questions to 58 questions. Plus, there were open-ended questions as part of that. This is really intended to be an overview. As a Board of Education, I know that you've been given a report that goes into more detail, and we've shared the questions and the results, not the open-ended results, but the quantitative results with the administration as well. And so as we go through this evening, we're going to try to move in a way that's expeditious for all of you, because I know you have a lot of business to do tonight. At the same time, at least give you a grand understanding of what the survey results found.
And Mr. Herman, I just want to point out for the board that detailed report will be posted on our website following this meeting.
So as I mentioned, we gave 5 surveys in the response to the survey was administered from January 23rd to February 12th of 2023. There were a total of 2,193 individual respondents to all of the surveys. There were 759 parent and guardian survey responses, 223 instructional staff responses, 66 non-instructional staff responses, 20 administrative responses, and 1,125 student responses from students at the junior high and high school. You can see that breakdown a little bit more here as far as for the parents and guardians, those represented in blue in that first column were those that were elementary parents or associated with elementary, intermediate in the orange junior high and high school. You can also see the students breakdown as well, and the instructional staff breakdown on those pages. On the next pages, you can see the breakdown pre-K through 4 for the non-instructional staff and administrators, 5 through 12. Number of participants there, and then the central office. So the analysis procedures, really survey respondents indicated how much they agreed or disagreed with a variety of statements. And the 5 possible responses for each item were assigned a numeric value. Strongly agree, 40, agree, 30, unsure, 20, disagree, 10, and strongly disagree, 0. That was for the parents. The parents had 5. They were the only ones that had the unsure because it's more likely that they would be unsure. Students and staff members were given 4. Strongly agree, disagree, and strongly disagree. And those were rated 40, 30, 20, 10. So one thing I want to point out is when we're comparing the means, compare means within a survey. Do not compare means from the parent survey to a student survey because there's a different measure there. When completing a survey, people often provide consistent or correlated responses across similar items. And that indicates that a pattern or what we call a factor exists in the survey. For example, someone who indicates that they strongly agree with the statement, "I feel welcome at the school," may also agree or strongly agree with the statement, "This school is a friendly place overall." And so identifying patterns and creating factors within surveys makes it easier to interpret results and reduces the process of dozens of items to a limited number of factors with similar type of responses. And so to capture the relative outcome across all the responses, we calculated the mean and the median values for the entire population within each school building. You'll see some of that broken down. You'll see favorable responses and unfavorable responses percentages. Factor values for each respondent greater than 20 in the parent survey or anything greater than unsure were considered favorable, and values of 20 or lower were considered unfavorable. So if you're if you're looking at factors, and let's say the factors comprised of 8 different questions, and someone answers unsure to all of them, that would be unfavorable response. If they answered unsure to 7 of them and favorable to 1 of them, that would be a favorable response. Or 7 unsure and 1 unfavorable, that would be an unfavorable response, just to give you an idea of that breakdown. It'll be hopefully more clear here as we go. So the first thing we're going to look at is some of the domains and the factors for the student survey. So under the teaching, caring, and relationships factor, you can see these questions were included. In other words, they had internal reliability with one another in terms of the similar answers around a similar topic to be grouped together. So it's easy to talk to teachers at the school. At my school, at least one teacher or another adult listens to what I have to say. My teachers care about me. My teacher gives me individual attention when I need it. Teachers are available when I need to talk to them. Teachers understand my problems. A teacher or some adult at the school will notice my absence if I'm absent, and I'm comfortable asking teachers or other adults with help with my schoolwork. Those were closely correlated questions and answers. And so you could see the overall from the student survey was a mean of 28.7 or a junior high mean of 27.9 and a high school mean of 29.2. That starred there at the top because it indicates that there's a statistical significance between the differences in the junior high and high school around that question. And so and we're going to look at the percent favorable and unfavorable for each one of these factors in just a moment. The recognition and SEL and fairness factor, you can see these questions here. And for right now, I'll read these to you, but when we get a little bit further on, I won't read every one of these to you this evening. To have an idea. So this factor was based on these questions. My teachers praise me when I work hard in school. Adults working in the school help students develop strategies to understand and control their feelings and actions. At the school, students have many opportunities to decide things like class activities and rules. Adults working at the school reward students for positive behavior. At the school, students are taught the importance of understanding their own feelings and feelings of others, and school rules are equally applied to all students. And again, you can see the overall mean of 23.4 with a little bit lower, close though at the junior high 23.2 and slightly higher at the high school, but really closely related between the junior high and the high school. I was reminded, and I apologize if I do it tonight, not to use the word middle school. I was in a district for 17 years that had a middle school, and sometimes that when I think of those age students, I go there. So I will try not to do that. Peer caring. Students respect one another. Students at the school try to stop bullying. At the school, students work on listening to others to understand what they are trying to say. This is significant in multiple ways. So the mean was 21.5 overall. The junior high mean was lower at 20.4. The high school slightly higher at 22.1. So there is a statistical significance again between the junior high and high school there. But this was also the most significantly negative response from students. And this peer caring, the students respect one another. Students at the school try to stop bullying. At the school, students work on listening to what others or to understand what they are trying to say. And I'll show you those percentages here in a minute. Students felt much more positively about their relationships with staff, as you can see from that very first grouping, than they talk about how students treat one another within the building, particularly at the middle school. The factor of equality and harmony. All students are treated the same regardless of their parents' financial status. The school provides instructional materials that reflect my cultural background, ethnicity, and identity, and people of different cultural backgrounds, races, or ethnicities get along well at this school. And again, those are pretty high means there. The mean of 27.9 overall, 28.1 at the junior high. And so it's interesting to contrast the peer caring with the equality and harmony questions and those student responses there. We'll talk about a few of the observations of that a little bit later. So on just those, factors, You can see this broken down in terms of the percent unfavorable in the dark and the percent favorable responses in the light. So the teacher caring at the junior high and high school, you see those components there. The recognition, SEL fairness, and the peer caring is the one I was just pointing out there. That is something. And so there will be questions, and I would encourage us to think about, you'll hear me say this multiple times, really culture and climate surveys. There's advantage for looking at them over time. There's also advantage in looking at any particular culture or climate survey for the purpose not of evaluating or coming down hard on any particular individual or particular school or particular concept, but to ask better questions. That is the real value in a culture and climate survey, is to begin to say, why is that? There's an opportunity to ask questions and say, when you look at these peer caring questions, help us better understand what it is that makes you feel that students aren't kind to one another. That is one small example, but I would encourage you, as you continue to look at results, look at the reports, to just continue to ask questions and utilize those questions to foster more meaningful conversations with those in your school district. Here's some just observations on what we had just looked at. And a few things to note here. And again, I'll try not to read the whole thing to you. On average, students had a positive perception of the caring relationships they experienced at school. On an average, or the mean of response to items of 28.7 and a median response of 30. These results indicate that a typical student agrees with the statement in this factor. Jumping to the last one, the proportion of students with an unfavorable perception of, the last sentence in the first paragraph, the proportion of students with an unfavorable perception of teacher caring and relationships was 9% higher among junior high students than the high school. Student perceptions of recognition, support for emotional learning, and fairness had mean and median ratings just over 23. There was no significant differences between the ratings of the building level, and nearly 6 in 10 junior high students had a favorable view, and a little under half, 45% of the high school students had a favorable view of perceptions of recognition and support for emotional learning and fairness. Peer caring ranked as the lowest factor in this category with a mean of 21.5 and a median of 23.3. Roughly 1/3 of junior high and high school students held a favorable view of how peers treat each other, which also means most students do not tend to agree with those statements. Perceptions of the ways in which schools promote equality and harmony, though, were almost directly opposite the perceptions of peer caring. Around 2/3 of students had a favorable view of equality and harmony in the schools. This dichotomy suggests that students recognize the school's efforts to create a positive climate for students, even if they don't believe that their peers are behaving in that way. And so that's, again, opportunities for conversation and dialogue there. We asked students about peer violence. And so that was what we titled the factor. You can see the type of questions there. Students at this school carry guns or knives to school. Students at this school, I won't read them all, are teased or picked on about their race or ethnicity. Students in the school are teased or picked on about their physical or mental abilities. Students at the school are often bullied. Again, now you're hoping for lower means and medians here because of both on this section and on the statements about underage or illegal substance use, on vaping, alcohol, or drugs. And so you can see the lowest mean is in regard to the peer violence section. Those are low numbers. Underage or illegal substance abuse is higher, and obviously a very significant difference between the junior high and the high school. And this isn't entirely shocking at all. As a matter of fact, I'd say it's common. So students at the school think it's okay to vape. Students at the school think it's okay to try drugs. Students at the school think it's okay to get drunk. If you were to break those out individually, vaping would be the highest percentage, then drinking, and then drugs in that order. And again, this doesn't mean that students are saying, when we look at these percentages here, when we look at substance use at the junior high or substance use at the high school, don't misinterpret these results. And I don't want anyone in the community to misinterpret the results. 78%, that doesn't mean that 22% of students are using, that's not what we're asking. We're asking, do students have the perception that other students in the school think it's okay to do that? And 22% had a unfavorable response, meaning they think it's okay. At the high school, it's 48%. And so we have to do like a risk behavior survey with students if we were going to dig in and actually ask students, are they using and do their friends use? And this is a perception that kids in the school think it's okay to be doing that. So again, peer violence in the schools did not appear to be a significant issue. Responses indicated that substance use among students is a greater problem than peer violence for high school students. And high school students reported significantly higher rates of substance use than junior high students. These differences in response patterns between junior high and high school regarding peer violence and substance use are typical. In general, bullying, threats, and fighting are common among junior high students, more common than amongst junior high students than high school students, as younger students have less self-control and less experience with negative consequences of these behaviors relative to older students. Among older students, use and experimentation with drugs, alcohol, and vaping become more common as access to these substances become more available, and they're approaching ages where that risk-taking behavior is more common amongst the students. And so it's not unusual to see those differences in a school district. Moving on to parent survey. The general perceptions in climate domain, you can see the different factors under there, and we're going to break some of these apart. There's the positive student-centered climate with 3 factors underneath it, and then negative and unhealthy climate with 2 factors underneath that as well. So this general attitudes towards the school has a really high number of questions that with internal reliability to one another, and so. And this is a really phenomenal rating for a school district. It's a very high mean, 29.9, with a median at 30.5. And then you can see the differences by buildings there broken out with Blue Ash, Mapledale, Montgomery, Sims, Green, junior high and high school, all listed with Blue Ash having the highest mean for this. Again, this is parents. And the high school with the lowest. Keep in mind, when we established the survey, we had conversation with the school district about willingness to have parents complete the survey 2, 3, or 4 times if they have students in multiple buildings. And there was a desire to have them associate whichever building that they had their kids go to, but to complete it one time. And so that is taken into account for all of the responses from a parent that has 3 students in 3 buildings would be applied to each of those buildings. And so when you see these differences, they are probably minimized a little bit because of that reason. Because there are differences, and you'll see trends from the elementaries to the junior high to the high school, and those would likely be slightly greater if we had parents take it for each building. And so, but here are the general impressions, connections, and attitude results in terms of the breakdown of unfavorable responses for those questions compared to favorable responses, that's really something to be proud of for any school district. That's very significant. We do a lot of work in a lot of school districts, and your parents, and when you talk about general impressions of the school district, believe that there are so many things going right. When you look back to that, I'm sorry, I'm going the wrong way. When you look back to this list of questions, this is a lot of what you set out to do as a school district. And so that's certainly something very positive. When we look at safety and safety communications, you can see the questions associated with this. The school notifies parents or guardians effectively in the case of a school-wide emergency. The school takes effective measures to ensure the safety of students, and the school made it clear to my child what they should do if there's an emergency, natural disaster, or a dangerous situation during the day. Again, very high percentages in terms of perceptions of safety, and very high mean scores across the board. Meeting students' needs. The school has quality programs for my child's talents, gifts, or special needs. This school provides high quality services to help students with social or emotional needs. The programs and resources at the school are adequate to support students with special needs or disabilities, and the school has enough programs that develop students' social and emotional skills. And again, you can see the differences here in terms of percent favorable and the percent unfavorable, but overall high median scores across the board, with lower scores as the students get older. The next domain is general professional experience, and has both quality and capacity questions on there. Oh, I'm sorry. That was the end of the parent survey highlights that we put in here. You will see more of those pieces covered in your full report, but for the purposes of this presentation tonight, and to keep things moving, that's what we're sharing. Moving on to the staff surveys. General professional experience, quality. And you can see some of the questions that were included in this factor, and that had internal reliability with one another. Instructional staff are encouraged to share ideas. Leaders value my ideas. Instructional staff are kept informed on the current issues of the school. At the school, there's a feeling of trust amongst the entire staff. It's those type of questions. It was 76% favorable, and a mean of 29.5. Overall. I'll show you a building breakdown momentarily. In terms of capacity questions, I have opportunities for dialogue and planning across grades and subjects. The school places priority on addressing students' mental health needs. Students at my school have the support and resources they need to be successful in their learning. Again, 85% favorable overall, with both a mean and median at 30. And you can see those two components broken down then by building. With some significant differences in the buildings. It doesn't necessarily just trend from younger to older. There are differences in the staff ratings at these buildings. Personal and interpersonal climate, commitment and capability, types of questions. I'm excited about teaching. I receive enough support, resources, equipment to do my job. I'm able to stay on top of my work and professional responsibilities. Again, these are high means, 29.2, and collegiality. The ideas of instructional staff are valued by other instructional staff. I feel like I belong, and people at the school care about me as a person, with high mean score of 32.3 and 92% favorable. That is also very significant. You can see the differences of the mean scores there, again, broken down by the buildings. Still with the staff survey, instructional staff survey, attention. The school emphasizes showing respect for all students, cultural beliefs and practices, and staff of the school always stop bullying when they see it. Staff of the school recognize students for positive behavior. 96% favorable overall amongst the staff. And then fairness, school rules are applied equally to all students, and discipline is fair and consistent. This is, again, a place to ask questions and dig in. So 52% favorable. And so with a mean of 25.5. So when you start seeing some of these trends of how the other areas are rated, and then you see something like this, again, that's an opportunity to let's dig in a little bit deeper and have meaningful conversations about why that is. And you can look at some of the differences between the buildings. The fact that it's lower at a junior high or high school is not entirely surprising when we start talking about school rules are applied equally to all students and discipline is fair and consistent. What do we know about junior high students and high school students? They're more likely to push the boundaries. They're more likely to be subject to discipline than at the elementary level. And so the fact that there are some differences with junior high and high school, I think there are that's logical, and we would see that across many different school districts. But at the same time, when we look at the differences at fairness, particularly the high school rate in there at 19.8 in terms of the mean, there's an opportunity to have conversation. And we look at overall quality here. We're moving into the staff survey, the non-instructional staff. There are fewer factors for the non-instructional staff because there are only 66 participants. And so the ability with a smaller group to get internal reliability between the questions is limited. And so in that particular case, we can look at these overall trends and you see those results there. But at the same time, it's also worthwhile to get into the individual question responses to look at those. And the same thing with the administrators on the next page. You can also see that there are just a limited number of factors that are being reported, and we did not break them down by building because we didn't want to personally identify anyone in the non-instructional staff or the administrators. I will say in terms of the discrimination in the workplace, staff at the school are discriminated against regarding their race, ethnicity, cultural background, or religion. And staff at the school are discriminated against regarding their sexuality. To have those are consistent across the board of staff survey responses, very, very high percentages favorable on those. And then you can also see for the administration, those responses around climate, capacity to support students, and discrimination in the workplace. We also provided open-ended questions. All respondents were asked, this school is great because, and then an opportunity to fill it in, and the school would be better if. Students were also asked what behaviors are rewarded in the school, what behaviors have consequences, what school rules are followed, what school rules are enforced, what school rules are ignored. And the staff were asked, the school administration is great because, the school administration would be better if, a district administration is great because, and the district administration would be better if. When analyzing these responses, we would read through all of the responses. You look for overarching themes, you identify possible themes, then you go back through again and begin coding all of the questions according to those themes. These are the themes that were most prevalent and the percentages of comments associated with those themes. They're shared this way just so you can get an idea of the breakdown. In your overall report, you see definitions to each one of these areas. And so the school is great because teachers, staff, and counselors, this is from the parent survey, 33% of the parents said that, and then caring and student success, which is sort of a closely related cousin, but it didn't specifically identify those positions, was 17%. There's no question that your people make a difference, and it's recognized that they make a difference. It shouldn't be a surprise in the school district. We are a school is people, hundreds, thousands of people serving hundreds, thousands of kids, and so but it's really recognized that the school is great because of the people. You have this amazing facility initiative going on. It's incredible. The facilities are beautiful. They create the right environment for students. But look at the contrast in terms of this school is great because it was big enough to become a theme at 4%. But look at teachers, staff, and counselors. Parents also recognize the opportunities and the broad range of opportunities that exist within the school district, and that the value in diversity to be called out like that was also very significant. That is not seen in all places. Here are some of the example comments that were pulled, just to give you a flavor of what some of those open-ended comments look like. And again, we have quite a few more open-ended response slides to go through. So I'm not going to read all these to you, but you can just see a few of them there. And I want to make sure I'm getting to your questions as well. The parent survey, the school would be better if. Now, in this particular case, 15% mentioned teachers, staff, and counselors in some capacity. So it's important for us to understand that it's important as everyone is in making the culture positive. It doesn't take very many few bad interactions, or it only takes a few bad interactions to also have a negative effect. And so that was identified there as one of the themes in terms of the school would be better if, but significantly less when we talk about the positive component. Items associated with curriculum or the content being delivered to students was 15%. A desire to educate the whole child and to look holistically at education was at 12%. A desire for more meaningful parent partnerships was also at 12%. Here are some of the comments there. They taught more real life accountability as the kids got older. Every student's dedication to teaching, they would be better if every teacher's dedication to teaching translated to quality learning for all students. In other words, some teachers are less effective, which impacts learning from some students. The buildings there, that's again, this is the parent survey. So they are associating themselves with the 3 buildings. So, and I just read that comment and it says Montgomery Junior High, High School. So they have 3 students in 3 buildings. To treat all students special. If a child is just normal, they get lost in the system and the teachers let them ride along. That was a comment from a parent from high school. The student survey, the school is great because student responses. Again, when we think about this theme of people, look at the students' response. 25% talked about staff. 21% talk about the opportunities and the broad range of opportunities that they have within this school district, and 19% of their comments were about their peers. And that's a great thing, that students feel that connected to their peers. Opportunities and quality are also closely related, but they value the quality of the education that they are receiving. The students do, and also should be noted that students value the diversity within the school district. Here are some of the comments from students. Teachers care about students. We're given so many different opportunities outside of sports that offer students the chance to try things that they may want to do in the future and to gain more experience. We have a lot of cultures. It's nice. It has nice teachers and everyone is helpful. So again, quite a few comments there in regard to the staff. The school would be better if relationships and respect. So this really shouldn't be surprising. Think of the data that we saw on peer caring. And the largest group in terms of their comments had to do with relationships and respect. 15% identified additional opportunities that they would like to see. 15% also talked about staff interactions or experiences they've had with staff in terms of the school would be better if. Concerns about workload from students. I would love to have seen that one trended over time, over decades and decades, and see if that's exactly the same today as it was decades ago, but I don't have any of that information. Student survey. This school would be better if, here's some of the comments there, and you can see that people accepted each other, or no more bullying. All teachers were kind and respectful to their students and their ideas. People weren't mean and dramatic. You can see some of those comments there. Instructional staff survey. The school is great because the staff value the other staff, and that's very apparent. Also value the administrators and value the students. They value the environment and parent partnerships and community support. Those were themes that came out. You can see some of the comments here. I'm going to start moving a little bit faster out of respect for your time. The school would be better if from the staff, 18% related to processes or curriculum. Those two things were kind of lumped together. All those comments weren't all the same, but it had to do with the operations and the educational delivery, curriculum related operations. There was additional support, particularly just more value, I guess, for how teachers the role that they play. 10% talked about discipline, and 9% talked about social behavioral supports. You can see some of those comments there. The school administration is great because of their support, because they listen, because they're caring and collaborative. And again, those are all closely related things. Some wonderful comments there. They are extremely supportive, always providing us with ideas and things to try in our classrooms. Our understanding allows us to grow professionally and are so involved in our classrooms and school. They hear us and celebrate us. Our ideas are respected, incorporated. They give us so much of themselves with time and energy. They love the students. They listen, they support, they care, they communicate well. They are champions of the staff. The school administration would be better if, again, would like more support, would like more communication. They'd listen. The too much is actually, these are actually too much and already great were counter to what the question was asking. The administration would be better if, and 11% of the comments said they're already great. They're great. I don't really have anything to add. They can, I don't think they can get any better. And 12% said they would be better if they didn't have so much on their plate. And they're really, they have too much to handle. And so those were in a way supportive. 11% trust, those were not necessarily supportive, feeling as though they aren't able to trust the administration, the building level administrative, or would want a more trusting relationship with them. And you can see some of these comments here that represent some of those themes. The district administration is great because of their support, because of the communication. 13% they support the district's mission or drive the district's mission and vision forward. 11%, again, this is a counter one because the district administration is great because 11% responded in either a negative way or saying, I don't really know them. I don't necessarily know. 9% because they're visible. The professional development opportunities there and promote learning, 10%. Friendly, caring, 8%. And you can see those other smaller categories there. The district administration is great because they are very approachable and have a community-centered mindset. They're willing to let us try new things and be creative. Try to make themselves visible in the district. They try to get to know their staff, and they're doing great things by trying to help support the staff. They are friendly. They make an effort to know the staff and are visible in the buildings. The district administration would be better if visibility, 14%. We've had some conversation about this already in plans and And that is a challenge, I think, for any central office administrator in terms of the proactive versus reactive and trying to get out into the buildings. And so, but it's would be valued. The thing to take away from this is staff want that. They would be better if the district administration were more visible, showed more support. Trust is both directions here. There are comments if they trusted us more, as well as comments about if we could trust them more. So the trust is was two-way type of comments and 12% about listening. But again, they're already great. Came up as a significant category there in 12% as well. You can see some of those comments. The district administration would be better if we saw them more often throughout the halls and we could get to know them a bit better. If they spent more time in classrooms, when one is removed from a classroom, they unintentionally forget the workload teachers have and give them one more thing. If they trusted their teachers, state test scores aren't overly emphasized and the end all or be all for making instructional decisions, letting the teachers be more innovative with their lessons. And sometimes it feels communication isn't widespread. Some people hear information while others don't. It would be nice if important information was shared across all staff involved. The highlights, I've already hit this several times. The success of the schools lies in the people. Again, there's it's very much valued in terms of the wide range of curricular and extracurricular opportunities by both students and parents in this school district. The community and the student body diversity are viewed as assets by parents and students and staff. Recent changes to leadership in some of the buildings was mentioned as a positive. Communication from the schools to families was appreciated and valued, particularly when you look at the safety communication. That's it's working. On average, students had a positive perception of the caring relationships that they experienced at the schools, and that was strong for high school and junior high. Peer violence did not appear to be a significant issue. Most students reported that they focus on academics, 79% favorable at the junior high and 78% at the high school. And that's also speaks to a culture and a focus and a belief in academics here. That can cut both ways because there's some questions that you'll see in the results on stress and anxiety. Those I think there's again an opportunity for good questions around the focus on academics and are there related stresses associated with it. Over 75% of instructional staff responded favorably to quality of professional experience, and over 90% responded favorably to questions regarding collegiality and student support and attention. Some of the opportunities, just as with positive comments provided by the participants about the professionals who have the most frequent interactions with students, the people, parents and students identified opportunities for improvement with the people in the schools. There's a desire on the part of parents for a greater sense of partnership with the teachers in the school, and supports for typical students and students with exceptional needs or gifts, also a desire to have additional supports in place. Several comments expressed concerns about the district's proactive approach to develop social and emotional learning among students. That did not come out heavily in the data as a theme, but when we think about it as opportunities, I think that continuing to talk about your why when you discuss social emotional learning is important to communicate as a school district. Just under half of the high school students tend to agree with statements related to students vaping, consuming alcohol, or trying drugs. And so, again, I think there's opportunities for dialogue about that. Around 1 in 4 junior high students and just under half of the high school students reported unfavorable levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. And so, again, I think there's opportunities there for meaningful dialogue. near 1/4 of the students' better if responses referred to relationships and respect and the general need for better treatment of others, especially students with special needs or students whose identity aligned with underrepresented populations. And that was their better if responses, and you saw their peer caring responses and data there as well. Last few slides. So around general themes, and these are more examples. These are a few that we're pointing out, but we would encourage as you continue to do the look at the data to when you make an observation like this, that across all participants and roles, it was clear that the quality of interactions between people is a core strength of the organization. The strength could also be a weakness when just a few poor interactions could taint a person's view of the organization as a whole. When you see that, then what are the questions that can go with that? What steps do we take to communicate the Sycamore way so that we have sort of consistent behavioral expectations? And how do we dialogue about what those are? And how do we establish and reinforce expectations for how members of the organizations treat each other and students and families? Around diversity, you see an observation in there and then questions. So what do we mean when we say diversity? And to what extent are we ensuring appreciation for and the attention to the diverse experience, needs, and perspectives and interests of our students and families? What systems do we have in place to respond organically as the diversity within the schools and the community continues to evolve? Opportunities. There's a shared perception that the district offers a wide variety of opportunities in formal and informal settings. And so then there can be guiding questions about that's a real strength and it's valued. Are we making sure that all students have access to those opportunities? And how do we rethink or redesign or replace opportunities to reflect and combining themes, the diverse nature of our students and families in the broader community over time? And then community support. It's really clear from the results that the district benefits from the strong supportive community. And so, and then you see some of those guiding questions there as well. Final observations, every survey provides opportunities to learn and to ask questions and to grow from a snapshot in time. Please understand that a survey is a snapshot in time. There are things that were going on in your district or in the world or in the community at the time this survey was given that can shape the results of a survey. And so it's important to look at surveys over a long period of time. It's important to utilize surveys to have meaningful conversation. But these surveys also recognize that there is much to celebrate in this school system. There are significant opportunities to get better. And at the same time, there's much to celebrate. And the thing I'm celebrating is the fact that you take the initiative and effort to do this. You're a high performing district. You have a great reputation in the state. And yet at the same time, you realize that you cannot stay there if you don't pay attention to the culture and the learning environment for your kids. Parents' overall view and support the Sycamore Community Schools is very strong. That's a celebration. A significant majority of the staff responded positively across all domains and factors. And you can look at that more closely in the detailed report. And Sycamore's students value the broad range of opportunities their teachers and staff they value their broad range of opportunities, their teachers and staff, their friendships, and the diversity that exists within the student body. Thank you for sticking through all of that with me. I know that was a lengthy presentation. Is everyone still awake out here? They're still awake. All right, yeah. And I will pause there for questions.
Can I just ask a process question?
Yes.
Why did you put unfavorable or the unsure in with favorable and just not leave it as its own category of unsure? Because it's neither. It's either unfavorable nor favorable. Why would you not leave that by itself?
Yeah, because we were using in factors when we have we had a group like those groups of questions, right? And so no one answered unsure across the board in that. And so what we're doing is combining their scores. So if you have a person answering 8 questions, we're combining their scores from the 8 questions. And they have a mean that is either into the favorable mark or into the unfavorable mark. They can't have a mean that lands at the unsure mark.
So it's a company decision you made with the survey data that you did.
Correct.
Got it.
So on any individual question, we could give you a percentage of an unsure. But when
Okay.
you start to combine the questions like that into the factors, then you're either going to fall above into the favorable range or below into the unfavorable range.
Thank you.
Sure.
You mentioned this was a snapshot in time and there's value in asking the questions, but I also heard you say there's value in looking at this over a continuum. How frequently would you recommend that we do this type of survey and what are the things that we should benchmark? This is a baseline for us. And what are the things that we should really be eyeballing for improvement?
Yeah. So I would recommend an annual. I think when if you start to measure, unless you have other smaller measures of climate that are quick and easy during a year, and there are things that can be created that way. I would measure on an annual basis, and if you measure more than that, you can get survey fatigue, result fatigue, and people really not interested in fully participating in the process. Plus, there's a lot of opportunity, as I said, for conversation about, and you need time to have meaningful conversation and to change any practices. And so you're moving a big ship here. You're turning a big ship, and so taking periodic snapshots about how that ship is turning over time. I think a year is very reasonable on that. I think looking at the pieces, the general themes that came out of this survey and those that we find, I think there needs to be additional dialogue in terms of where your priorities lie from those themes and what you really want to measure over time. We, in creating this survey, we left it wide open with the administration about the type of questions that went into it, and there were many of them. And seeing the internal reliability from this school district and looking at those results, I think we could trim the number of survey questions down significantly and still get meaningful results about themes because we now have this first snapshot, which will make it easier to measure over time, and makes it easier to administer the survey and less confusing as far as any variables in the data. And so I wouldn't want to, in this moment, at this meeting, identify these are all the themes that you need to track over time. I think we would want to look at your data and say, where do your priorities lie, and what good data did we get, and then say these are based on those components. That's what we're going to measure over time.
And I should have started by saying thank you for the presentation and all the materials. I would, it was a lot for you to go through, but it was a lot for you to execute. So thank you for that. One additional follow-up question. I'm assuming you've done a similar type of survey with multiple school districts. And since this is a baseline and we don't have a comparison to ourselves, which is what we really are focused on in our improvement, can you give us a sense for how this climate and culture survey would have been like in a quartile basis versus other school districts that you have administered culture surveys for?
I can give you perceptions. I can't give you anything that I would be able to say for sure is statistically valid. Partially because we didn't use the same questions. We gave the choice of we don't have one culture and climate survey that we administered all. We gave the choice of what were the important priorities here. And what questions were wanted to be included and not, and then broke down that data. I can tell you that a lot of the things that came up, and your parents' perception of the experience that overall climate in the school district is very, very strong compared to other school districts that we worked with. I would say that the students' value of diversity and the value of the opportunities that they are provided is strong as compared to other school districts that we've worked with. I think what you see in terms of some of the stress and anxiety or students' participation with drugs or vaping or drinking, I think that's similar to what we would see in a lot of school districts. So the staff results again are similar to strong on the strong side in terms of their overall perceptions and their like that value on collegiality and their general climate, the quality and capacity. Those were strong. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question. On some of the measures, for example, the negative general climate, the student survey, where the high school was 48% unfavorable, and then the junior high was 22. And I know that 48% is very high. I can see that. But why is I'm glad that the pure violence is lower. I'm very thankful for that. But why is 1 in 5 low? Or you said that 21% negative. Like, to me, if 1 in 5 kids feels they're concerned about violence, is that considered normal? Like, is that, to me, that just, it kind of surprised me to sort of say that that's relatively low or normal. I don't want to say normal because you didn't say normal, but can you just explain that or give us some perspective on that particular issue?
Sure. So when we I pulled up those questions. I think this is the section we're talking about, right? These are the peer violence questions. Yeah. So students at the school carry guns or knives in school. Students at the school steal money, electronics, or valuable things while at school. Students at the school are teased or picked on about their race or ethnicity. Students at the school are teased or picked on about their sexual orientation. Students often spread mean rumors or lies about others in this school online. Students at the school threaten to hurt other students. Students at the school fight a lot. Students at the school are teased or picked on about their physical and mental abilities, and students at the school are often bullied. And then we see, so I think you bring up a good point in terms of if 1 in 5 kids in general are responding unfavorable to that group of questions, is that low relative to some of the other types of concerns that is low. But I guess when you talk about the magnitude or the importance of that, you could say 21% and 1 in 5 is too many. We have to have additional conversation about that. And that's a great example of the let's generate some questions and have some conversation and understand what students are talking about when they share that information with us. Perhaps we have some student focus groups. Perhaps we dig in and have additional conversation. Certainly relative to the other components, that was a very significantly smaller percentage, either in the positive range or in the negative range.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. It reaffirms what we're doing well from our community so that we can continue to keep doing it, but it also gives us growth areas and opportunities. Along with Mr. Comerford, this is a snapshot. It's a good snapshot, but it also gives us things that we need to work on. And me as one board member would be more interested in where we take this with our administration at the building level. To see, so we can start to unbundle this and really start to peel back that onion and look at, what are the questions that come out of this and what are the action steps that we can do. So that's something I'd like to see follow up on, down the road on action steps resulted from the survey. Thank you.
One more quick thing for Mr. Lewis. In light of the SAC discussion on vape, vaping we had last week, a good presentation. I think we need to also consider all of the numbers from the high school coming out of this and the junior high school about the stress, anxiety, depression. And also the peer caring, because remember during the presentation that they did last week, it was a lot of focus on all of these things being intertwined. We need to understand all of this to answer all of these questions together. I think we need to bundle in figuring out how we can get the stress, anxiety, depression levels under control, along with the peer caring, et cetera. The perceptions that some kids have of bullying or being mistreated based on race. We need to understand what's going on and we need to address this. I think we can, as a district, address these and do more examination of these things.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Dr. Steger. I think you are absolutely right. That's, when I look at this, especially this slide, when I think of, as Mr. Herman said, the substance use is likely a huge portion of it is vaping. And I know when we had that group looking at vaping and working with Mr. Lovell and Mrs. Zelby, we still have a lot to unpack from that presentation, but I do think that presentation is probably going to be one of the ones that we may want to hear as a group, just because I think it's significant to the challenges that our students are facing. And if you talk to many of the students, just anecdotally, they almost tell you that they're just using it to cope with all those other things you mentioned. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And Mr. Ballant, we will be unpacking this for a while and certainly working with our administrative team after they get a much deserved break for the year. But when we come back, in the next school year, it'll certainly be a focus area for us.
And I just have one more question. This might be more for Mrs. Wagner. So on the 44-page one that we got an email from you guys, it looks like the quality of general professional experience of instructional staff and the commitment the instructional staff were both low. I'd be curious to find out more information. Is this an indication that staff morale might be down? Is it an indication that we need more professional learning opportunities? What's going on? We need to examine that and see how we can help people feel more connected in those two areas, especially.
I would agree. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And before we move on, I really appreciate the recommendation that was made to do this on an annual basis. I found this very helpful. I found the approach and the communication of information to be very helpful to me as a board member. And I know we're not on a vote, but since we're here now, I would say by looking for head nods that we would like to do this on an annual basis.
Yes, I agree. I agree with that.
I would agree with it if there's action that comes out of it. I don't want to do a survey just to do a survey every year. If we can see definite action and results of it, then absolutely.
I would say I would be agreeable to this, but we have to figure out what are the questions we're asking next to follow up on, because just the whole high school and junior high school kids with their substance abuse and vaping issue is just an entire subgroup of itself. And what I just mentioned is what's going on with the instructional staff with these two areas. Those are two huge things also. I don't know if we can snapshot it right away in a year without digging into those things first and examining them. Does that make sense, Mr. Comerford?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Lewis, our next presentation.
Yes, a much shorter presentation. But Mr. Herman, we appreciate it and we appreciate you coming to be here in person because it was a much needed results, and we're excited about the next steps working with Impact Group to analyze and move forward in the future. So our next presentation is really in response to, I think, some education not only for our school board but for our community regarding our harassment, intimidation, bullying, reporting and response process. And Mrs. Zelby does a phenomenal job of not only keeping us compliant, which you are like the queen of compliance. That could be like her new title, but she is also very good at just understanding process, procedure, and follow through. So I'm going to let Mrs. Zelby walk you through, just again, a brief overview. If she went into the depth of this topic, we could be here for another 2 hours. So thank you, Mrs. Zelby, for being here and walking us through this.
There we go. You good? Okay. Okay, so thank you for having me. I'm excited to share a little bit with you about our refined process for harassment, intimidation, and bullying. I say refined because in the last year and a half, we worked pretty closely with our administrators to identify how to streamline the reporting process and ensure that we had accuracy with our process and records. And so a team of administrators participated in that, and the end result this year has been pretty favorable as far as the feedback from our administrators on ease of process. And I would say that from our standpoint, we can more readily and easily access records and make sure that we have documentation to support that our work has been done in an appropriate way. Thank you. So first and foremost, physical and emotional wellness are at the forefront of what we care about with our students. And so when we think about reporting processes, we want to make sure that both students and families know and understand their opportunities and methodologies for reporting any allegations of harassment, intimidation, and bullying, as well as our staff, because they share an equal responsibility in making sure our kids are safe. So first and foremost, we start with the Ohio Department of Education requirements, because there are quite a few. I did not put all of them in here, but some of the highlights are listed. I'll share with you that we work a lot through what the actual definition of harassment, intimidation, and bullying is, what constitutes or satisfies that definition when working through the investigative process, but also looking really closely at making sure that parents have ease to report, that guardians have ease to report, students are able to find that accessibility both in our buildings and if they are at home. And then also making sure that our teachers are aware of how to report incidences both face-to-face, but also using our online tool. These are some additional requirements, including at the end of this semester, you'll receive that semi-annual report from Mrs. Wagner that shares with you the reported incidents of alleged harassment, intimidation, and bullying. We're going to talk a little bit about that piece and how that has changed over the years as far as reporting requirements. So let's start with training. We spent some time training our administrative team this past year, both in a set time where everyone came and learned about our refined process, our refined paperwork, but then also ongoing coaching and training. And I can tell you that it is not uncommon for administrators to call me as they are moving through this process of investigating to ensure that they're not missing any steps. And that serves as a nice form of checks and balances to make sure that we're really doing what we need to do for our students and our families. And then we annually are reviewing this process with our administrators, including onboarding new administrators into this process to make sure that they are familiar and compliant. And I would say that the coaching has probably been the piece that people are giving us the most positive feedback around, is having that resource to provide some coaching as they work through that process. Kids also get building level training on how to report, who they can report to, and also what is bullying, harassment, and intimidation by the definition that's provided to us by the state. So our process has several steps. First and foremost, we have reporting. So we are informed that there is an allegation of harassment, intimidation, and bullying. And so our first response to that is to investigate. And our investigation starts within 24 hours. Now, it may not be completed within 24 hours, but that first step, whether that is speaking with a student or speaking with someone who reports the incident and has more information that they can possibly provide, that is to begin within 24 hours or less. Following that thorough investigation, we then look at our response and intervention in the event that it is founded. So if it is substantiated harassment, intimidation, and bullying, there are some additional steps that we take both to protect the victim in the form of a safety plan, as well as making sure that all parties are informed. And you'll see the next slide goes a little bit further in depth into our process. And then the last piece that that I'm really proud of our team this year on is just better archiving. There is no tool out there that archives these records for you. So you have to come up with a methodology to do that, to ensure that building to building, administrator to administrator, they're able to access those records. Paper files are not always the most efficient. And so we found a better way this year through Google and actually through some consultation with our technology department to make sure that we have archived records that not only administrator to administrator can access, but sometimes our superintendents will receive phone calls or concerned parents who want to know more, and they are also able to access those records now if they need to with ease. I said within 24 hours, we started an investigative process, and then we did some work with our team around what does investigation look like. And we actually created a template of questions that all of our administrators ask. And then they are able to ask additional questions, and we train on how do you think about what some of those follow-up questions might be based on the information students give you in that investigative process. The administrator is then charged with evaluating based on the information that I received through that investigative process, have we satisfied the definition of harassment, intimidation, and bullying? At that point, all parties involved are contacted. So parent and guardian is contacted both for the alleged, the accuser, if that information is available, because anonymous reporting is a part of state law and accessible for everyone, as well as if there are witnesses that we've spoken about. And I'll share with you, in a common investigation as a former administrator, in a common investigation, if I call Chad down and I say, did you see anything? And he says no. And I say, did you hear anything? And he says no. I'm probably not notifying parents. But if I call him down and I ask some really pointed questions, or I'm asking questions about a specific incident or sensitive topic, even if he saw nothing, heard nothing, I'm going to contact parents just to say, I'm investigating something and I did speak with your child today. Once we determine if that is substantiated, if it is, then the victim is offered safety planning. And that safety planning looks at safety across all environments. So not just instructional environments, but extracurricular environments, transportation, et cetera. And we look at putting protective measures in place for that victim. And that may include that if a student is founded or it is substantiated that they have harassed, intimidated, or bullied another student, they may face not only disciplinary consequences, but things may change for them. It is never the victim's responsibility to have a schedule change. It is never the victim's responsibility to have a new bus route. In the event that a student is founded in that situation and we need to utilize those types of measures to ensure safety, it is the student that was founded to have been doing the harassing, intimidating, or bullying that would experience those changes. And we share that very transparently with our families. But we also recognize that kids who engage in harassment, intimidation, and bullying are also subject to what they call reverse harassment, intimidation, and bullying, right? Especially as we get older, kids talk, they put things on social media. So there is sometimes a need to do some reverse safety planning as well for the accused student or the student who was engaging in that maladaptive behavior. So those are all components that we look at when we talk about safety planning. And then there's follow-up. So we're following up with both students moving forward. There's usually some type of stay away agreement that is identified or discussed, but we're following up with both parties to make sure that nothing new has occurred, to make sure that students continue to feel safe. And then over time, some safety plans are faded, some are modified, and some are terminated based on how the family and the victim feel about that situation. So that was the short version of our process here. Are there any questions I can answer?
And I just wanted to mention, in addition to, she talked about the state governance of this process. Our board policy is also very well written around harassment, intimidation, bullying. So I appreciate Mrs. Bitter and Mrs. Weber and Mrs. Wagner and others that did that revision. But, over the history of time, we have gone to that policy a lot. And it really helps us define for students and for parents. This is exactly what the level, or I guess magnitude, that we're looking for to qualify it as harassment, intimidation, or bullying. There's a pretty high standard that has to be met as we work through that process. So I think it's critically important that people know it is out there and they have access to it when they need to see it and understand it.
I have questions. So are the numbers that Mrs. Wagner reports to us once a year, those are the numbers you're referring to in your process?
So those are the allegations, if you will. So that does not confirm substantiated and unsubstantiated.
Okay.
And when the first reports come in within that first 24 hours as we start our investigative process, depending on where it came from, sometimes those are eliminated. What I mean by that is, if a student reports that they're being bullied, if I call them into my office and I say, let's talk about what you're experiencing, let's talk about some of the definitions, go with bullying, do you still feel that you are being bullied? If a student says yes, we proceed with the investigation. Now, with younger students, we are often weighing in with our families as well, because sometimes they don't understand all those nuances. But certainly with a high school, when we talk about things like it has to be repeated, it has to be pervasive, you have to feel comfortable in the environments that you're in, even if you don't cross paths with that student. Is that how you are feeling? If kids say yes, we're proceeding with an investigation. It does not mean that it is substantiated, but we're going to move forward. Sometimes when you share that information with kids, they'll be like, it happened once. It was just super rude and super mean. And we'll say, okay, we're still going to investigate. We're still going to discipline because we have a code of conduct about how we treat people, but it may not rise to that level. And we share that back with families as well before we make any final decision that we would not proceed with a full bullying or harassment intimidation investigation.
Just to follow up on that. So for kids that are, let's say, in elementary school versus the intermediate versus junior high versus high school, I have received community feedback that the way students kind of handle bullying in high school is different than perhaps elementary. In elementary, you may go to your teacher and say, hey, this is happening to me. But when you're in high school, you don't do that because then someone creates a social media group and comes after you and makes your life miserable for some time. So how do you handle, are you handling non-reporters, or how do you handle the developmental differences in age and how some kids just are not ever going to tell an adult that they're being harassed or bullied by another student?
It's
Like, what do you
really
do with that?
We talk a lot about education for all kids. So see something, say something. And, you know, that movement started as a part of school violence prevention. This is part of that, right? So there are many students that won't self-report that something is occurring, but there are usually witnesses and there are usually other kids that know about it. So part of our job is to educate all of our students that someone may not feel comfortable speaking up. That's part of how you're respectful and responsible in our environment to secure the safety of all kids. And it is anonymously available, right? And so we do see anonymous reports that come in from kids. We will also see kids that will go directly to a school counselor or administrator and say, this is going on, or at least I think this is going on, but please don't bring my name into it. And we're able to honor that.
Is that part of the training? Because you said that you do student training. Is that what you mean by that? You're teaching the students ways that they can let you know when things are happening so that you can get involved.
Absolutely.
And the teachers too.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have a public participation. I do have one request from Ms. Gunnarsson. So if you could please come forward. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Maggie Gunnarsson. Recently announced to the rising third grade families is an expansion of services for students who have obtained scores qualifying them as advanced in reading. This is an important step for Sycamore to fully address the learning needs of significantly more students than the district has previously done. As co-chair of Sycamore Gear and a parent representative on the state level Gifted Advisory Council, this is a good move. I believe this move is occurring in part because of the more appropriate district level administrative support through Mrs. Jackson as the full-time gifted supervisor of gifted programming, which is another recent positive change. It is important to speak frankly about the realities of this change. I have concerns for our third grade ELA teachers who bear the brunt and of the responsibility for enacting this change. The incomplete list of what they're being asked to do next year is to continue to ensure students pass the third grade reading guarantee, incorporate the state mandated science of reading, adapt to the new district ELA curriculum, continue to deal with the impacts of the pandemic as our rising third graders or kindergartners when virtual school is an option. They will have additional trainings just for this group of students and to address the greater span of students in their classroom than they have previously done in reading. They will also have slightly larger class sizes as new students will be pulled out of their ELA classes, as has been the practice at Sycamore for many years. They're also adapting things to like the introduction of Canva. That's an incomplete list, and it is significant even for the excellent teachers that Sycamore has. These teachers will need extensive support and clear, progressive, smart objectives. They need time to learn and adapt too. I request that administration consider that these teachers will need to expand their classroom libraries to address this new span of students. Teachers should be reimbursed for doing so. It is also worth exploring if teachers want to opt into being compensated for training over the summer as well. Additionally, to ensure that these teachers' efforts to reach their full spectrum of students is properly supported and acknowledged, I also encourage Sycamore to invest in administrator training so that they understand students who are gifted and the best practices in gifted education and differentiation. The expansion of ELA service is a good change that is overdue to happen. The delay has the unintended impact of a year of monumental change for our third grade ELA teachers. Supporting them must be a high priority to ensure that Sycamore remains a destination district for teachers and families alike. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lewis, moving on to superintendent agenda. Our first item is master facility plan update.
Yeah, I'll let Mr. Lovell give an update on the master facility plan, and I do think I saw a hand go up about I'm assuming you want to talk about the master facility plan update, so. Okay.
So we will have a presentation. The board will ask questions and have a discussion, and then you'll have an opportunity.
Mr. Lovell, thank you for, as always, updating us on what's happening with our facilities. And I see tonight specifically about Sycamore Stadium Fieldhouse project.
Yes, but before we do that, I'm going to throw in just a quick update for the junior high, because that's an important project that we have going on and we have a lot of action on that site. And so thought maybe we'd start with that. So if you want to move to the next slide, you can see there, this was a recent aerial photo of the demo that's occurring at the junior high. We're currently taking down that back annex gym portion. I haven't been over there the last 2 days, so it might actually be further along than this. But what you can see there, if you're looking kind of to the top of the screen, is it's very close to the academic wing in the front office area. And so the priority in getting this down is that they can start the site development, which is where our parking lots are going to go. And so we appreciate everybody at the junior high in our community for allowing us to disrupt that property while school's still going on. But that is the critical path moving forward to getting our building open for the fall and getting the students in there. A couple other really important things with the junior high. The floor installation is complete in the academic wing. We have academic furniture is going to start arriving on June 5th. Our administrative furniture is all in. The administrative offices are set up and ready to go. Right now, one of the big things that's happening over there is the gym floor installation is occurring, both in the main gym, the Ox gym, and we'll start to do the theater flooring as well. The theater seating has been almost complete over there. If you get an opportunity to go in, it's such a cool environment. One of the big things happening right now is all the interior doors are being installed. You might not think that's a big deal, but there are a lot of doors in a school to go on. There are a lot of doors. The main power changeover occurred. We are still waiting a few items to be delivered and related to some of our electronic components and things like that. But the big push was to get the main power over, which allowed us to have that gym floor going in, which was a critical path as well. And so those are just a few of the highlights, but I thought I'd touch on that since I know there's a lot of excitement over on the property over there. And we're looking forward to tearing the building down in front there over the summer. It'll kind of be like that move that bus, right? Be able to see the school behind it. And it's pretty cool. All right, as Mr. Lewis said, I am going to talk with you again about the field house. As you know, as you remember at the last meeting that we had, we brought our preliminary estimates that we had. And so I'm going to run through just a presentation. I'm going to do a few slides of the journey of the field house, so we're all reminded about why we are where we are right now, and then share with you the results of the bidding. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So Mr. Long, if you want to move to the next slide. So the Fieldhouse Master Facilities journey, as you remember, and I'll just keep saying that because we've had many conversations around this. The design of the field house for the athletic master facilities was part of that big scope project that we were phasing out. There was never an intention of having the field house done that first season. We knew that that was not attainable. It was a 6-month project to get the stadium up, which was pretty impressive in general. So we did, we opened up phase one of the multi-use stadium last year. At that point in time, we started to have conversations about moving forward with what a field house / locker room would look like out on that property. When we originally designed it, it was a grand building. It had a lot of different stuff. What we had to do though is we had to get stakeholder feedback and really determine what is the need of that building out there and how might we now phase that project out. So we sat down with a lot of different folks, the athletic department, coaches, to truly understand what would be the desire of that space and how would it be the most functional, meaning how might we create a space that could be used year round by a lot of different groups rather than just for 5 or 6 home games for football, which is what none of us desired. So we got a lot of feedback. We really took a look at what was that space. Once we did that, we started looking at some of the estimated cost and quickly realized that this was going to have to be a phased project if we were going to get it done. If anybody out there is doing any construction projects, I've said this over and over again, it is not cheap right now to be building. Specifically, it's not cheap to be commercially building. So we went with that reduced size and we went to we actually leveraged MSA, the architects that were helping us with the baseball, softball, and part of that agreement was to look at what we had done with SHP to kind of help us understand, hey, is there other paths forward with this building? And so they gave us a few suggestions and they leveraged JS Held. You might remember JS Held because JS Held is who we had used as our third party check on the natatorium prices as well. And when we used JS Held previously, the difference in prices between JS Held and HGC when we were looking at those were within $30,000 to $40,000. So we felt comfortable when MSA was leveraging them. So they basically came back, they looked at the preliminary designs that were given. Remember, those were not 50% drawings at that time. It was basically, this is what we desire to do, estimate that out. Those estimates are always done on a square footage type basis, but they can get generally pretty close. So we got those cost estimates by JS Held. Those are the ones that came back to us. And we had 2 estimates done. We had the full build out, and then the phase would be the what we called the white box or the shell, right? That's when we got those prices where the shell came back and we said it's going to be about $500,000 to $600,000 to get that project done. From there, we went to HGC. There's a lot of reasons we did that. They're already on site, so there are cost savings to leveraging HGC with the current relationships out there to get that done. And most importantly, to get it done on the time frame that we all desired to get done. They adopted those estimates from what JS Held had, and then what they sent that out to bid. That's where we get caught all the time, right? You don't know what the market is at the moment in time that you're bidding. And I will tell you that the bids that we got from HGC, we had great coverage. What that means is that for each of the trades and each of the components of what we were bidding out, we did have 3 to 4 companies that were submitting bids to it. That's good because it helps us really get a good handle on, is this fair in the market? And then this is the point in time where we just struggle, right? We get that back and we find out that the number that we had in the estimate, the bids came in back and about 40% over that. And that 40% may be a little bit high, but we'll talk a little bit about why that is. Next, thank you. All right, there's a lot on the. Oh, yeah.
Just a timeline question.
Yes.
At the last board meeting, we had given a head nod for procuring some stone.
Correct.
I believe.
Yes.
Did we go ahead with that?
We did move forward with that, but we do also have time to be able to cancel that order if we desired to do that. A very limited amount of time, but yes. Okay, so this slide's a little bit complicated. There's a lot on it, and I apologize. I'm typically not one to put a lot on one slide, but I was trying to capture everything that was going on in one visual. What you see up here is a kind of brief synopsis overview of the bids that we got back, or the price structure that would be of the field house. On the number on the left there, the dollar amount on the left is what the bids came back at. So the lowest bid in each category. The number on the right was what we had as an estimate. The things that I've kind of highlighted there as yellow are things that came in above. And then you can obviously see it looks green on the screen there are things that came in lower. Over there on the left, I put a few stars because those are the areas that I think when we talked with our general contractor and we talked with our architect about it, those are the areas that are still just driving cost on projects. The concrete, that number's up. Plumbing, that number actually, they were surprised it wasn't significantly higher than that. Plumbing is somewhat of a wild card right now out there. The electrical, you can see, is significantly higher on that one. I will tell you that there are opportunities there, and we can talk about that when we talk about the value engineering of it. But again, if you were to ask me what the biggest headache I have in the $127.5 million worth of construction we're doing, it's electrical. Supply chain demands on that. It's just really tricky right now. And in fact, on that electrical, they even told us that there were a few components we wouldn't be able to get by August, but they would be able to make it work and then replace those, kind of similar to what we're doing in a couple areas of our construction. And then that site demo earthwork, that one right there, the reason that is significantly higher than what JS Held had is that JS Held's estimate was basically because we've already done the site development out there for the field house when we built the phase one. But what it didn't necessarily have in there was the drainage, the stormwater drainage off of it. It was just draining the water kind of onto the property. And so that's over in that value engineering as well that we can talk about. So all in all, when you look at that, it's a $777,000 related to the hard cost. And then you can see down there on the left side, the soft costs associated with that. This does not include architectural fees, which we've already brought to you for the shell. This is the contingency, the insurance, the fee for HGC and the bond. So all in all, that brings us to $833,373 for a shell building. Now, the question that we always ask is, how do we do this less expensive? Like, what can we do? What are some things that we can take out? Actually, the first question I always ask is, I could build a really nice house for that amount of money. Help me understand this. And I get that question by a lot by the community. And I do have to say that commercial building is extremely different than residential building. There are certificates, there are licensed, there are a lot of different things that go into it. And the general construction of it, there are thousands of kids a year that goes through these spaces with wear and tear. So the intensity of the design and the space is much more. The value engineering items, these are things that we said, what are opportunities that we might be able to capture that will allow us to decrease this cost and maybe add it to phase two or make this a 3-phase process if we really need to get this open for the start of this season. The first thing here is remove the outside flat work. That's basically the concrete that surrounds the building. It would just be putting concrete to the front doors and a concrete pad. So think of an emergency exit concrete pad. The rest would just be grass around it. We would take out the storm work out of it. That was that earthwork and that I was talking about. So it basically, we'd be draining the water kind of onto the property versus a part of the entire system out there at the stadium. Unit heaters and exhaust fans only. So we had some more significant HVAC systems in there for heat. Granted, it was only going to get us to 55 degrees, but it set us up for success for our tech closets and things like that. So we might have to take the tech closet out of this phase, which would mean we wouldn't have Wi-Fi or things like that in this building. It would be at the concession, but not in the building. Going to a 4-inch slab on grade instead of a 5-inch. Again, nobody sees that, but you're value engineering out an inch of concrete that the building's sitting on. Residential type gutters versus commercial, electrical downgrades going from, I think it's going from I'm gonna get this wrong, but like a 600 amp panel to a 400 amp panel. And then no signage on the building. And then doors and hardwood downgrade. The items that I've indicated in green there are things that we could move forward and not do. But if somebody were to say, hey, I'm really passionate and I'd like to make a donation to upgrade the gutters, that can be done as we progress through the project, right? The doors and hardware and the slab, things like that, those two are pretty much, they have to be decided on early in the game. So by doing all that, and the alternates are down there as well, the ADA restroom, which we talked about, would be potentially board funded, the dividing wall and the hot water heater. Those still remain down. Those weren't part of the cost. So when you look at that total cost, we're talking about with the value engineering, 704,000.
I just want to make sure I understood
Yes,
what you
sir.
just said. The 704 would not have an ADA restroom as part of the package.
Correct. That was sitting aside as an alternate from the very beginning.
And what is the cost of that?
18,000, about 19,000, 18. I don't have the exact number, sorry. So that's, so that puts us down to $704,000. I'll keep going unless there's more. Yes,
I just want to understand, are you recommending that we build this building without an ADA restroom?
I am not recommending that we would do that. I'm just saying that that was put as an alternate because that was going to be set aside from the fundraising dollars.
Yeah, that was going to be district paid for.
Yeah.
Above and beyond. Yeah.
I just tried my best to keep that separate from the cost. And I think that that was because of the miss of the concession area. If you would like to go to the next slide, thank you. All right, so what's a potential path forward? I always like to come with options, right? And so, option one is the full shell field house at $705,000, actually more than that with the restroom. And we move forward and we get that done. And that's the actual cost with the full bid. Option two, so
That's with the value engineering taken out.
that is with the value engineering. Yes, I thank you for that. Yes, I did not put the full cost up there. Then what I did was I went to our architects and I went to HGC and I said, then the value engineering, how do we get that down? Like, what's the next option? And it's basically square feet, right? You're basically starting to chop off parts of the building. Could you build on, like, could we still plan for the site development of that same size building and then have an opportunity to add on? You could in the long run. So what we did was we said, what if we were to look at an option without that team room? Now, I just want to caution because remember, we would be building a shell, so there really would be nothing in there. But when I say the team room, it would be that end where that team room is designed. But I also want to make sure that we understand when we build the shell, we run the plumbing and everything to it. So how it's laid out is going to have to be how it's laid out in the future. So that's why we went back and forth on the design a lot. So option two would be basically taking off that team room area. That gets you down. And I just, again, that big at the very bottom, these are just estimated savings, right? They have to take it back out the bid again because we got to see what the bids would be based on those savings.
But with option 2 and 3, there's no room for visitors.
That's absolutely correct. It would be a locker room. It'd be a locker room with restroom facilities.
Home locker room.
Home locker room, unless our home team wants to be gracious and let the visitors use it.
Just clarifying, does this mean the roof only extends part of the way of this?
We would cap, there would be a block wall. The roof would stop, everything would stop.
So the original design of the exterior walls would be shortened.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, the whole building would be shortened. That takes us down to an estimate. They gave me some estimated ranges. I use the very low end of the savings just because I'm using the low end. That puts us at 620,000. Then option 3 would be taking off kind of that middle grayish section there, which is the training room and additional restrooms for the team room. And so again, you're just shortening the building more. And they estimated that would get us down to about $605,000.
Just to be clear, there's really going to be nothing inside of there for any of these options, right? Like
Correct.
the pictures you have in there were actually not really there.
That's
just
correct. I just wanted you to
Throws them
originally
out.
see
Yeah,
in the final product, what would be gone out of that. Yeah, that's it. Yes. So the 605, 620, 705, that gets us walls, a roof, and plumbing run to the ground, but nothing interior, no lockers, no restroom facilities or anything like that. So our athletes this season are still going to have to use portalettes or whatever that we bring out there like we did last year. I'm just trying to be super transparent because I don't want there to be anybody that walks away thinking they're getting something if they invest in this, that they're not. This is going to be a bare bones building, but it gets us the shell. It gets us the walls, it gets us the roof, and it gets us the ability to have a place for the athletes to go into for halftime.
So what would be, I think I asked this the last meeting, what's the estimated cost if you did option one to do the interior over time? Is there, just saying, would it be like double the cost basically?
I asked what, it's hard to estimate that because you don't know procurement of the there's a lot you don't know in that. They basically have said that they believe that phase one is 50% of the total cost. I don't, it depends. If we do this in 5 years, you just don't know what that cost is going to be.
And I think it's critically important, like, it seems like our conversation is really focused on the use for the stadium for football on the Friday night football games, but the building is also going to be used for baseball, softball, other teams that are playing at that facility. And especially when you think about a locker room space, right now our baseball, softball players don't have a place to get changed and get dressed and do the things that they would do. So even though that it would be used for the purpose we're talking about on, Friday nights and Saturday mornings with our multiple teams that play at that facility, it is also going to be used in those other seasons. So, just because it's able to be used on those nights for, football, it would also be used for, spring sports. And, obviously I can't think of a winter sport that's going to use it. Nobody's out there in the winter, but I just think it's important that we, keep a focus on the fact that it could be used by lacrosse. It could be used by baseball. It could be used by softball and not just football players.
Would they use it when they have a restroom or a locker room? Or, I'm just trying to think of a softball or baseball player. Would we have porta johns out there during their seasons as well?
What we've been able to accomplish and something that, you just, in hindsight, you have to start to figure out how to use the facility better. There are restrooms right there at the concession area. So the gates are open. The only time that I think the area is locked and they're using it, and I've only been to a handful of baseball and softball games, but there are portalettes there for when they have practice, because I don't think they leave it open all the time. But when there are crowds there in games, I saw people going into the stadium to use the restroom. So I do think it's important that and I talked to Mr. Lovell about this signing and making sure people know that there are restrooms in there and they are open at that point in the season, because it's not just for use for the stadium. Like, to me, those restrooms are great for that entire facility that is up there. And I think we want still our community members to feel comfortable. Like, I see kids out there just throwing football with their dad, like, go in there and use the restroom. Like, no one should have to use a porta potty just because, we haven't unlocked the facility for the spring.
So for the shell, so whatever shell, if we were to choose one of those 3 shells, so what would happen? Would people just go into the empty shell and get changed? Like, I guess I'm confused. What would we do with these until they have what they need inside?
Yeah,
How would that look?
I'll speak specifically just for, the pushes to get it open for the football season, right? So to Mr. Lewis's point, they could be used for a lot of different things. Having an open space is never a bad thing. I'll tell you that around the district, we're always looking for more space. I think people could make use of it for the football game, specifically speaking. Last year, we rented tents for each of them, and it's an opportunity for the teams at halftime to be able to go back and huddle. They use the restrooms to do everything they need to do. And so they would leverage this space to do that. And I'll tell you, operationally, renting tents is extremely expensive. There's an operational cost to that. And so for us, I do believe that long-term, there is a desire and a need to have a facility out there or something, some type of locker rooms for all of our athletes to be able to use, whether it's through competition or Mr. Lewis said during practice times.
So you would just bring little chairs out there or into that building and put
Yes.
things in there so that people could potentially change, I guess, but just not have anything
Yeah.
like lockers or anything.
Yeah, I think that I talked to Mr. Harden. He had mentioned that we have kept through our renovations, old lockers that were in good shape and things like that. And I think they talked about moving some of those out there to leverage in that space for the time being.
And that's also a great opportunity. Sometimes you get in-kind donations, people that can actually do some of that work. And I think you might see some of that as people start to see the shell take shape, that they might want to get involved and do some of that work. Mr. Lovell, my question was going to be, you said operationally it's expensive. Like, how expensive is it? Like, what are we talking about? Are we talking about $5,000, $10,000? Is it way more than that? I
If we're
don't
looking,
understand it.
sure, if we're looking for the entire season, based on what we paid for 2 games last year, this cost includes the restaurant, the portalettes, which we'd need out there. It's going to be about 58,000 for the season for the tents. 58,000.
I appreciate the options. You're chunking a building down and down. You're taking away signs that's going to make it look odd. You're making it smaller and you're making it a shell. And the long-term costs of adding on, if you were to ever add on, are probably much, much more significant. I don't see the benefit of chunking it down to smaller and smaller pieces. I think you either move forward with it, table it, come up with other options. I'm against keep making it smaller and smaller.
So I don't like it getting so small and I agree. I think it's getting very complicated.
I'm also against option 2 and 3. I think that's short-sighted.
I am also in the same agreement with this. I'm just worried about the cost of eventually finishing it and having it just sit there as an empty shell for a decade potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I share your concerns, Dr. Steger, of, how long does it sit there with a shell? And, it's a significant more chunk of money, another $700,000-800,000, $1 million to finish it. Where does that money come?
At last meeting, we had a letter from the boosters that was a commitment for, if I remember correctly, $550,000. $500,000. When we moved forward with the Seeger Natatorium, it was roughly at a 70% privately funded, 30% public funded ratio. If I look at the $700,000 that you're proposing here for option 1, the 70% was roughly $500,000 and 30% is roughly $200,000. I mean, in rough figures. So there is a precedent that we would have committed public funds at, if you will, 30 cents on the dollar to complete a project. Now, the challenge for me on this one is it's not a complete project. And so, but having said that, I do think that we have done the private funding at 70%. We have moved forward with in the past. So I'm just like highlighting that we have done that.
Correct.
And have done that recently.
I would the difference between $700,000 and $800,000, I would want to make sure that we're not being short-sighted in taking things out that really need to be there just to meet a number.
Can you go back to the things that you took off to go from 800 to 700 again, like the signage? How much did that save?
14,000.
I'm against building a building that has no signs on it. It's just going to look very odd to me. This is my personal opinion.
I mean, I think that, if you go back, Mr. Long, to the very first picture I had, if you look at, so where it says Sycamore and it has Aves, basically what we would do is that branding would be gone, but it doesn't mean that we, with just operational funds could put a sign up there so people know what that building is. It just wouldn't necessarily match the branding that we have out there at the concession and pull it all together. Again, we think about things as a master facility and what do we desire out of all of it and trying to tie it together, but
And I will tell you that you're making some great points about the funding and the things to cut. I worry about what value engineering is an awful word in construction because it means, you know, you're taking things out that you originally desired or you believed were needed for the facility. So I would rather you, if you desire a path forward and you decide that this is something that you believe that we should be doing, I would rather you hold us accountable because the problem with the real urgency is the time frame by which we have and our urgency to get it under I'll say a contract or a GMP to bring you to build it in order to have it open in compliance with the boosters letter. Because you know their desire was this donation is contingent on moving forward and you know approving a path forward to have it built. I would rather you look at us as administrators and say, we're going to give you 1 year to raise the funds and report back to us of filling the gap. You know, if you desire that to.
But there's nothing we can do if you don't. That's it.
I don't know.
You know,
I mean,
I understand the need for a locker room to make the facilities the next step. I understand the need for the athletes. It's just a big ask of the district. You know, there was significant pushback in the 2019 levy for using public funds for athletic facilities. And this is kind of skirting that. It's walking a thin line of that. You know, I want to have facilities for our athletes. Why can't they use a locker room at the Greg? Why can't they walk to the Greg at halftime?
so if you were to ask me what would be the two paths forward without doing this project, well, the one path would be to do what we did last year, which would be the tents, renting the tents, and that would be a $58,000 cost is what we got the estimates for this year to be. The other path would be to ask the GMC to allow us to extend our halftime at the games and allow our athletes the opportunity to be able to go back to the Gregory Center. I don't know if that's an option people desire, just like I don't know if they desire the tents, but those are two paths forward if this doesn't get approved.
Yeah, none of us have a crystal ball to know what construction costs are going to be. They could continue to go up. But construction is very expensive right now. If we wait a year, if we wait 2 years and can utilize existing facilities at the Greg, and we can come back and save hundreds of $1,000s to the district, what ifs? I don't know, but we all know that construction costs right now are extremely expensive.
I will tell you as well, we are, as part of this project, and it may not seem like it, but we are saving 3.2% on general conditions because HGC is already on the site. Now we could probably argue their fees, but that is a thing because they're mobilized out there, because they're with the natatorium, we aren't paying for another superintendent for that project. There are shared costs that exist within that to have them do that we wouldn't have if we did it in a year or two.
I'd like to hear the input from the boosters.
you didn't know you were going to be put on the spot as incoming vice president right away, right?
It's been 30 years since I've been in this room. On a Saturday, maybe.
Doing some testing.
Thank you, guys. Hope you all, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I'm BJ Thomas. I'm with Betsy Reinhardt. We are both part of the Athletic Boosters Board. I'm a 1993 graduate of Sycamore. Betsy's also a graduate as well, I think 1992. Give or take.
2002.
There you go. That's on that, sorry. Well, allergies. We both have kids currently enrolled in Sycamore. Betsy's got some that have moved on to college, but we're very excited to be here and appreciate the time. So what we put together last minute is really what's the consensus of some of the comments from the board and the community have brought to our attention, specifically in reference to the field house. So, I'm just going to read some of the comments that we put together. All of us, I think I can speak for all of us here in saying that we all have a huge sense of pride in our community, especially with the transformation of our academic campuses. I mean, it goes without saying just how beautiful everything is becoming. But with that, as a community, we also believe very strongly that it's critical for us to maintain the same sense of pride in our athletic facilities. The boosters' mission is very clear, as you guys all know. We support excellence in Sycamore athletics. The Sycamore Athletic Boosters' total investment, both given and proposed, as you guys talked about already, in the Always an Aviator campaign is $850,000. That's coming from the community. That's how much we believe in everybody in this room as a leadership team and our kids and our program. Part of that 850 is the 500,000 we've committed to support this proposed movement forward in the facility. So, the athletic programs within the Sycamore School District, to all of us, are more than just a small piece of the community. We feel that it is one of the biggest driving forces that unites our community. In conjunction with that, coming to the high school, whether it's for soccer or softball or baseball or swimming, lacrosse, you name it, Friday nights on football, for football games, you get to see old friends, you get to see alumni. It really gives you that sense of school spirit and pride. And, if people haven't been to a game, I highly suggest that you go because you can feel it, right? And it's pretty awesome. But what's unfortunate when you go to the game sometimes is you see the visitors that see that there's little progress in finishing some of these athletic facilities. And this creates a perception, unfortunately, it becomes a story that's being told. So that story is where the real damage comes from. And what I mean is that we're eroding our residents' confidence in the district's ability to be leaders and get things done. Our true concern is if we don't move quickly with visible progress with the field house, this may jeopardize long-term goals down the road. In a sense that they may be thinking that the community may be thinking that we can't get some projects done. And I say we, everybody in this room. So the community relies on the board, administration, the athletic department, and I'll throw the boosters in there as well. They see us all as part of the same team for the district. And it's time for us all to unite in keeping forward momentum, resolve the issue, and change the perception that's created into reality. Okay. We also know that a professional focused effort on fundraising will be needed to complete most of the athletic projects. We feel that private donor fundraising on a professional level through a foundation and or an alumni advancement office can facilitate this achievement, which I think would be something to consider. And let me know that our goal is very clear. The goal of, I think everybody in this room is to further the mission of the district in educating the entire child, the whole child. For many, athletics is a key component of their education. And to not be willing to support the positive, inclusive athletics culture and the community, we would be failing. So I also want to say that we think that there's a need to create a culture and an environment where our student athletes want to stay within Sycamore. That's very important. It's imperative to maintain visible forward progress on our athletics in the athletic, program. Sorry, I don't know what I wrote down there. To be visible with the athletic progress on the athletics to show our residents that all of us, we value athletics for the community unity and pride that it brings us all. So I guess our request moving forward is to maintain two things. If you could provide a clear understanding to all of us of where the funding stands for outstanding projects, that would be great. And potentially maybe can we form a task force that includes board members, administration, boosters to close these gaps, maintain the progress and finish the athletic projects. That's it. Thank you. Yeah, thank you guys.
Sir Lovell.
Yes.
I don't believe that the board is ready to make a decision tonight on any of this. I'm getting the head nods agreement with that. And I know there is a timeline. Talk to me a little bit about the timeline.
So if you remember back to last Saturday, I had the timeline up. Tonight was a critical path forward. Getting the GMP, the goal was to get the GMP signed tonight in order to get us opening for the first game. We did order the block, so that puts us in a good position because that was the biggest lead time we had. The bathroom, no matter what, we knew wouldn't have open by the first game. That was going to be the one that would be the second game, I think. I can't tell you exactly. I'd have to go back tomorrow and ask them how the timeline would be adjusted based on whatever potential next meeting would be. I could get that to the board tomorrow. But without approval tonight, I don't think it's realistic for me to sit here and say it'll be done by the first game.
So the options as you're presenting are, the complete build was, if you could review those numbers with the board again.
Yeah, actually go back to that one right there. Thank you.
The 833,000.
Yeah, so the complete build
Is
is
the 704,000.
correct.
Mr. Lovell, does that include contingency to cover?
Yes,
Okay.
it's not,
Just
that
wanna make sure.
833 includes the 19,000 in contingency.
Okay.
And then to value engineer would be $704,000.
Correct. Number, that's
Just putting you on the spot here, as we always do. So we have the boosters money of 500,000. Can you talk us through, is there anything else in it, always an aviator that's been donated?
The additional funds available, we received additional pledges of about 55,000 above and beyond the boosters contribution. And then we had approximately $52,000 remaining in the initial phase one multipurpose stadium. So we had just a little over $600,000 between the pledges from the boosters, other donors, as well as some remaining funds.
So roughly 600,000 of either 833 or 704.
Correct.
I'm just, value concern scares me. I guess I would
agree.
like to, I don't know which pieces are important and which pieces aren't. Did we just take things out to try to get the 704, or were those?
What I said to the architectural company and our GCs. What are the opportunities that you know right now that can be value engineered that are easy opportunities? These are the lists that they gave us.
I mean, to me, I'm not I'm not an engineer. 4 inches to 5 inches to me doesn't really make a difference. And if there's significant savings, that's something the board could consider. To go with electrical downgrades and,
Those are things that
things that concern me in the long term.
in the long term, we're going to have to pay to upgrade them.
You're gonna pay for maintenance, you're gonna pay for
Correct.
replacement costs more frequently. So
Residential gutters are going to probably last you half the time that a commercial gutter would.
speaking for one board member, I would like to understand a little bit more of the value engineering. Maybe
Okay.
if you could put dollar amounts to them
I can.
and understand what the risks are, if you can say 10 years for a residential gutter versus 20 for this, so that we can really understand. I don't want to try to force something into 700,000 if the true cost is 833,000. And then we get stuck with something that's going to cost long-term. It's going to cost the district more money long-term.
I was just looking at the, assuming 833 is a bid we have in hand.
Mhm.
For everything we asked
Yes.
for.
Yes.
We have the 500,000 from the boosters and then 50,000, I'll just say roughly 50,000 from always the aviator. That's 550,000. That leaves a residual 283,000 at the $833,000 price.
Mhm.
That's approximately 34%.
But we have another 50,000 that's still left over from phase one.
Mhm.
We have the additional ADA restroom cost.
I think that needs to be taken out. I think that was a miss. And I think that needs to be looked at.
We would cover that independently.
Yeah.
So it's included in the 833, correct? So
833, no.
no.
That was still an alternate on top of that.
So what is 600? What's 600,000 out of 833, Brad? Mr. Cummer.
I'm glad you.
Percentage wise?
Yes.
Well,
Oh. If we have roughly $600,000 fundraised versus the 833 or the 704? What percentages are
That's 72%. It's
of which number?
of 600,000 is roughly 72% of the 833.
But I would interject here also that 500,000 is over, what, 10 years? It's not an immediate, just so we remember that too.
The pool was not immediate either. Original phase one, the money we got from United Healthcare was not immediate either. It was UC Healthcare, sorry. UC Healthcare was over 10 years as well. I mean, it's not unprecedented. I would prefer that we had the 500,000 up front, but I'm very appreciative of the boosters commitment to try to move this forward for 500,000. I'm just trying to look at a path here. I do not like shortening the footprint of the building at all. I don't like taking some of these value engineering items off. That's already a bare bones. It feels like really kind of a misguided. Honestly, I'm trying to find a path here for understanding what would be the what would be the public funds at the rate if we did 600 of private, but I'm not sure where the 600 of private funding is coming from. Do we have 600 of private funding?
The 500 from the boosters, then we had an additional $55,000 in pledges that were privately funded. And then of the funds that were remaining from the initial multipurpose stadium, which were privately funded, we have another 52,000.
Okay.
So,
Okay, so
yeah.
I mean, the reason I'm asking all the numbers questions is we have a precedent of we have approved 30 cents on the dollar for the auditorium. I mean, if somebody asked me, why did we spend public funds on the auditorium when we didn't include that in the original bond issue, my answer would be, I'm only spending 30 cents on the dollar for something that was needed for our district. And I think that's how I would answer that question. For this field house, if I can have the same ratio, I would feel comfortable having the same answer. I still have outstanding questions about where does the money come from to complete the work? I mean, that's actually the concern because we're already 10-year path to get the first phase funded. I'm super concerned. I like the idea that was proposed about professional fundraising. I'm also at the same time balancing my concern about we're going back to the community most likely in the coming years for an operating levy. We have some fatigue between the bond issue and the last operating levy in 2016. If we don't pass that operating levy, that's a bigger impact to our district's capabilities. That's one of the things on my mind. But stepping back, if I spent 30 cents on the dollar for the auditorium, why would I not spend 30 cents on the dollar for the field house? Is my question.
And I'll just let you know my opinion on this. I am of the opinion that I would take your recommendation, Mr. Lewis and Mr. Lovell, on the building type that you think we should have so that we can go forward and have a facility that we need. If you said, okay, it doesn't matter if we have 4 inches versus 5 or however, okay, I'll take your word for it. Or if you say, no, we really should keep the things we said we wanted and go for that, I will take your recommendation on that. I am the type of person who wants to get this done. I don't like that this is dragging on. I want to get these facilities built. I want to get that field house completed as soon as possible. That's my wish. I think that people can understand the difference between finishing in our district versus an operating levy. I do believe they can, and I believe they will. So I'm not concerned. I'm not as concerned about that, but I think you make a very fair and valid point that we absolutely have to consider. And having asked this question at last board meeting, low funding is happening right now for a lot of athletic facilities in the state of Ohio, even in public schools. There has to be a partnership of public and private, not has to, but that does, I'm taking our treasurer's word at this also, that is how we fund these types of facilities when the costs are this high and we are living in this moment. We don't know in 2 years from now how much that building is going to cost versus now. And we should assume that it's going to be worse in the future than now. So that's how I see this. This is not a comfortable decision at all, but I want to get it done. I want this to be done for Sycamore. I want to finish this project. I feel like it's incomplete and I want to get it done.
My other concern, my mind has got a lot racing through right now. My other concern is also doing the visitor field or the visitor locker room facility. When would that be on the timeline? Understanding the cost of that, those kinds of things. You don't have to answer me right now, Mr. Level. Just those are my thoughts that are going through my head because we'd have to have the shell, finish that. Would we finish that or build another shell? So there's a separate shell and then have to build those out, inside. That was just one of the things that's been on my mind. Because you don't have to answer right now. Like, it's just a question for next time. Thank you.
I do think it's an important critical question though, because, and I think BJ hit it right on the head, which is this 833 accomplishes the goal of at least having a facility out there for home and visitor. If you cut it down in any way, as you all pointed out very quickly, it cuts off things that, again, just having a space for visitors to even be. I think the long-term plan needs to be redeveloped. And I do think it needs to be said that, and I think the boosters realize this as well. Our community is experiencing a little bit of probably always an aviator fatigue. And I do think we do need some, and I know we're going to talk about it. We knew this meeting between myself and Mr. Ballant, we knew this meeting was going to be way too long with all the other things we had to handle to bring forward the discussion again about a private fundraising or alumni coordinator / development director position. But I do think Mr. Thomas hit it right on the head, which is that is something, the rest of us have full-time jobs. Fundraising was not a part of the job that I thought we were going to be doing every single day, but it has become overwhelming at times to continue to try to have these discussions while doing, the normal job. So, but I appreciate you asking the question because we do need to have a long-term strategic vision and plan with phases, just like we did with baseball, softball, because we understand where we're going, but it's going to take fundraising. And I do think knowing the boosters, this getting accomplished and being able to come together with us with a core group of people, I think they desire the same thing we do, which is a long-term vision that continues to get built, because this isn't new conversation. In my mind, when I first came to the district in 2012, I remember a meeting with Bill Rock and Michelle Johnson and a few others, and this same conversation was happening, which was, what is the long-term vision for Sycamore Athletics and what can we do to further that vision? And it's the same thing, thank you, Betsy and BJ, for coming forward and having that same conversation, because it is something that we have to continue to build upon and have a plan for. When are we, do we have a plan for a visitor locker room? Do we have a plan for a shell version? So I think it's a good question and it gives us a lot to think about from a strategic visioning going forward.
I certainly don't like to push things down the road, but I think this discussion needs some more consideration and to be brought back to the board either at our June morning meeting, or I know there's discussion of potentially having a special meeting somewhere in between.
Okay. In the meantime, I'll get you an updated timeline based on that. And then also the cost for the value engineering and the information you asked for.
Yeah, and I know we have blocks or bricks on order.
We do.
I don't, as one board member, have an issue retaining and keeping those because as we talked last time, those could be stored and we want them to match the rest of the facilities. So does anybody else see a need to cancel that order at this point?
No, I'd like to find a path forward here.
Yeah, I would too.
Okay.
And Mr. Ballant, I do want to remind the board, the boosters letter was clear that a decision had to be made by the end of May, if I remember it correctly. I'm not saying that they might not be willing to revise that, but I just think it was important that we state that. And I know if we have a special meeting, there might be an opportunity to discuss it, but
Yeah, I just wanted to remind you that we don't have another board meeting for 3 weeks. This is one of those, what I call the golden week board meetings where I have 3 weeks. They happen like 4 times a year. They're always exciting for me. But anyway, it's three weeks. So we're not talking a 2-week delay. We're talking potentially a
I
3-week delay.
thought we had aligned for a special board meeting for a week from Friday,
We'll work out Thursday, I believe.
Thursday. You're correct.
Yes.
If next Thursday would still be in May.
Oh, wow.
you can tell it's 9:28 at night.
And we're on item number 1. Yeah, we can. Again, I think this needs to be discussed, particularly with all 5 board members here. And, if Mr. Lovell or Lewis, if you could go back to the boosters, if for some reason we don't have a special meeting, if they could extend by 1 week into the first week of June, their commitment, that would be appreciative.
If we are looking at the first week of June, I think one of the other questions that will be really important to ask HGC is, can they hold those prices?
Yeah.
It's a very tight time frame. I don't know with the contractors that they have, whether they would be able
Hopefully we'll be
to hold it.
discussing it next week.
That would be fabulous.
Okay.
I will stay up here for change orders.
Okay. So you're waiting on me. I need a motion for the change order of EH Green Intermediate Construction Project.
Second.
There are a lot on here. These were just the backlog of all the ones that we had waiting. Just so you know, those have all been included in the PCO log for some time, so there are no surprises on there.
Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bitter. Aye. Dr. Steger. Aye. Mr. Ballant.
Aye.
And Mr. Comerford.
Aye. Motion passes. I need a motion for the change order of Sycamore High School renovation project GMP number 2.
So moved. Second.
Mrs. Weber, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Bitter. Aye. Dr. Steger. Aye. Mr. Ballant.
Aye.
And Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Motion passes. Excuse me, I need a motion for the change order of transportation facility project.
So moved. Second.
This was a change directive that came to you. This is for the site stabilization, the bad dirt at the transportation compound. Just as a reminder, we did have in our contract $50,000 allocated to site stabilization. So you can see that it went above that, but this is the final number
Dirt.
of dirt for dirt.
Thank you.
Great, clean dirt.
It's not dirt cheap.
It is not dirt cheap. None of our.
Please call the
You did there.
Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bitter. Aye. Dr. Steger. Aye. Mr. Ballant.
Aye.
And Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Motion passes. I need a motion for the approval of the administrative contract renewals.
So moved.
Second.
Any comments, Mr. Lewis?
Nope, just normal process of approving our administrators that were up for contract, and you'll note in the agenda compensate, this does not represent any change to their compensation. That'll be at a later date.
Any questions from the board? Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter. Aye. Dr. Steger. Aye. And Mr. Ballant.
Aye, motion passes. I need a motion for the approval of the classified director contract renewal.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Weber, please call a roll.
Dr. Steger. Aye. Mrs. Bitter. Aye. Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Mr. Ballant.
Aye. Motion is approved. I need a motion for the approval of the class of 2023, and Mrs. Bitter, as you have a student, I will allow you to make.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bitter. Aye. Dr. Steger. Aye. Mr. Ballant.
Aye.
And Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Motion passes. I need a motion for the approval of the 23-24 student handbooks.
I was just wondering before we have a movement to vote on that, can we hold this until the next meeting? Because I feel like I didn't have enough time to actually read everything and, make the comments that I wanted to make. Would that be okay with?
I second that.
Well, the reason that we were trying to get them approved now is because when final forms rolls over for parents to get in there and sign them, in the past, they've been approved later in the summer, and then parents had to go back in to sign their sign off on the handbooks. So if we can alter when they're put in final forms, then process wise, that would be fine with me if it's all right with the board.
Yeah, I need more time, and there are just a couple of areas that I need to have a deeper conversation and understanding of some of the changes in here that I would like to discuss. We can do that now, or we can have this in offline, or however you want to do it, but
We can, I think we can postpone it to the next meeting if it's fine with the board. That's your guys' decision.
So Mrs. Weber, help me with procedure.
Yes.
So
I need a motion to,
so I believe I have a motion by Dr. Steger, seconded by Mrs. Bitter, to table this item for consideration at the June 7th meeting. Is that okay? That what you'd like to do?
That sounds good for Dr. Steger.
that sounds good for me too. Please, thank you.
And I would welcome any questions that you have prior to that.
Yeah.
Phone call, email, whatever it takes. I'm happy to.
Absolutely. I will
walk through.
I will do that. Absolutely. And the presentation that we also had with the culture impact study, there are some things with that too. So I just want to have a moment to be able to
Absolutely.
talk with you a little bit more about that. Thank you so much.
That'd be great. Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Dr. Steger? Aye. Mrs. Bitter?
Aye.
Mr. Ballant?
Aye.
Mr. Comerford?
Aye.
Motion is tabled to the June morning meeting. I need a motion for the approval of the supervisor of ESOL programming job description.
So moved.
Second,
Any comments or questions from the board? Mrs. Weber?
Dr. Steger?
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter? Aye. Mr. Ballant?
Aye.
Mr. Comerford?
Aye.
Motion passes. I need a motion for the approval of the paraprofessional nurse job description.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bitter? Aye. Dr. Steger?
Aye.
Mr. Comerford?
Aye.
And Mr. Ballant?
Aye, motion passes. Mr. Lewis, moving on to other.
Yeah, Mr. Ballin, if it would be okay with the board, I'd love to introduce you to Mark, because he has sat here through 2.5 hours, and we still have more items to attend to. And so later in the agenda, Mr. Zimmerly will be asking for your approval for Mr. Zimmerly to join our team. We are very excited. I can tell you Northwest local schools is not very excited about losing him. But we are excited to gain him to our operations team, and Mr. Lovell did an exhaustive search, really looking for what we call utility players, and they have multiple skill sets that we really think complement our team. And when they look for what he was looking for was someone that has operations mindset, but also a student operations mindset. And Mr. Zimmerly comes highly recommended. His superintendent said, "You're taking one of my best." So I always hate making those phone calls, but then when I get off the call, it makes me excited that we're getting them. So luckily that superintendent will still be my friend after this, but Mr. Zimmerly is coming to us with a high school background, and he's also been filling in as an interim middle school principal. So I know that Mr. Lovell is looking forward to his leadership in some of the areas that he works on, which is, looking at attendance meetings and some disciplinary meetings and things of that nature, that he will certainly be a great complement to our team. So Mr. Zimmerly, we are excited to have you, and welcome any comments you might want to make to the board.
I just want to say I'm very excited to
Yeah, you can come up to the microphone. Sure.
Make sure it's on. Mark Zimmerly. I'm just want to take a moment to say I'm super excited to be here at Sycamore. It's exciting to sit here, as crazy as it sounds, for these 2 hours and hear just where you guys are in your process and just know the great things that you have accomplished and that are forthcoming. I'm super excited to be part of that and just hope to, jump right in and, provide any help in any way that I can. So thank you very much for having me and I'm excited to get started.
Thank you very much. And I can assure you our board meetings do not normally go on this long, but welcome to the district.
So he will be moving into the role vacated by Mr. Foster upon retirement. And I promise you baldness was not part of the requirement to be a part of our team. So I have a feeling you're going to get Mr. Lewis a couple of times.
I've been worse.
Hey, there you go. I can appreciate that. And please feel free to depart us at this point, because I know you have to middle school principal again tomorrow, so. And in lieu of the length of our meeting, I will just quickly say lots of senior activities. We already talked about graduation and Sims players. Little Mermaid was phenomenal. Thank you to Mary Wynn Hop, Julia Bethune, and Julie Patterson for their leadership of that. And that's all I have.
Going to ask that we take a 5-minute recess to pause our meeting, and then we'll come back to finish the public session. Thank you.
Hey, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. We're moving on to the treasurer's consent agenda. I need a motion for the approval of the treasurer's consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Weber, any highlights?
Continuing to have lots of good donations for all kinds of exciting things going on in the district.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bitter. Aye. Mr. Comer.
Aye.
Dr. Stuger. Aye. Mr. Ballard.
Aye, motion passes. I need a motion for the approval of the financial reports, April 2023.
So moved. Second.
Are there any questions? The only thing I did want to point out is the Seeger family have completed their contributions for the natatorium for the 2023 school year. You can see from budget donations, which is something we just talked about at length. We've received actually have cash in the bank of approximately $5.7 million of the pledges that we've received on all athletic facilities.
Any additional questions from the board? Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Dr. Stuger. Aye. Mrs. Bitter. Aye. Mr. Ballard.
Aye.
Mr. Comer.
Aye.
Motion passes. I need a motion for the approval of the 5-year forecast.
So moved.
Second.
Just a few highlights. I think that when looking at what has really changed from the last forecast that we looked at in November. Mr. Long, if you could just go on to the next slide. Next slide. As you noted, when we talked about real estate receipts at our last board meeting, because they did come in a bit under projected. Basically, that's because we have a higher amount of delinquencies than what we typically have. Our collection rate was about 1% below what is typical for our school district. I am meeting with the auditor next week, the county auditor, Bridget Kelly, who's the new county auditor, just to see if there's any trend that she thinks we should be concerned about. Overall, we're still hearing that the reappraisal that's going to happen in 2023 impacted in 2024 should be very favorable for maintaining property values within the district and very likely increases in our valuations for residential. It doesn't bring us in a lot of new dollars, but it does mean we'll be continuing to hit what I think would be the forecast amounts going forward. In terms of other revenue, just wanted to make you aware that the forecast still does not include the impact of the pipeline that was recently built through the district. While there's some funding in there for continued build out of Summit Park, even what has already been approved, and Montgomery Quarter, I still think that it will likely come in above what's planned. So that's something that Mrs. Logan will need to just monitor, and we'll talk about that through the transition. State funding, and I assume that Mrs. Bitter will give a little bit of an update on the state funding model. It has moved through the House, is in the Senate. I have a follow-up meeting with Senator Blessing just to see what his pulse is. He had 15 minutes, so I figured it was probably easier for me just to give him a call than to try to convene a meeting around that, to see what he thinks in terms of what may happen with the Senate. But I do think that stable to, slight increases in state funding in relative to our overall budget. But I think overall, good news on the state funding front. The only comment on other local funds is just that we've continued to see another small rate hike by the Federal Reserve. So, when you look at overall collections in investment earnings just for this year, is about $2 million over what we had last year, just because of interest rate increases. In terms of operating expenses, I did just want to make sure that you were aware that I have updated the projections to make sure that we include the cost of a tentative agreement with OPSI Association. So that's included in this forecast. We're continuing to see higher than what we've seen in a long time in non-personnel costs just because of inflation. So that's primarily in fuel, utilities, you name it, the cost is going up. So that's one area of our budget we've always kind of been able to control a bit differently, but with inflation, we anticipate seeing additional costs. Even with all this though, I think what is very important for our community to know is that when we came here and, when we passed our last operating levy in 2016, we projected we'd be back on the ballot in 2021. Even with all of the things that's happened with COVID, everything with inflation, I project that you'll at least be 1 year beyond what we had last said, through 2024, 3 additional years beyond that 2021 timeframe that we initially projected. You may be able to do better than that. I think that that's just one of those things with continued, diligence to work through that. There may be opportunities, particularly if some of these revenue sources come in as planned. And I think it's also really important to know that it's something that's been able to be accomplished even with utilizing our cash reserves to help us fund some of the master facility projects. For the most part, we've been able to do what we said we'd do with the bond issue monies, but things like the increased cost of the facility, the transportation facility, being able to fund and contribute to an auditorium that we never thought would have been on the table. Even with all of that, we've still been able to far exceed the commitment to the community. I think those are all good things to be seen in this forecast. So I feel very good about turning over the keys and then when you're moving forward, knowing that you'll be able to continue to do great things and always have what our students and staff and community needs at front of mind. And not a lot of districts can do that. We can. So I think that's really great. So with that, any questions?
Not a question, a comment. Obviously, you've done a fantastic job over your career, and for getting our 5-year forecast is not only planning on, but achieving our 5-year goal, 5-year forecast each time. It always amazes me at the end of every year how close you are in budget versus or projected versus actual. So, thank you for that. It just does stand out to me looking at our 5-year forecast as we continue to look at our expenditure trend. It is different than we've seen in our district in the past. The community has been very used to, that 1% to 2% increases. And, we are in a time of high inflation and everything is costing more. And that includes salaries. It includes everything you just said. So, looking at future years, we are looking at 3.5% to 4% increase in our expenditures. And that's just something that we have to keep in mind as a board and as a community. It's just, we're in different times than we were prior years. So thank you.
Yeah, I think to not be able to look at that kind of difference in trend, you'd be looking at different services to be provided. And I don't know that given what our community pays compared to other schools in the area, how fortunate we are that our business community is a large contributor to our schools. I would hope that before they would make a decision to not be able to do the kinds of things that we've been able to do, the impact on their home values and their community itself. I would hope that our community would take a good hard look before they would make that kind of decision moving forward. And I think they would. We have a smart community.
They will.
We have a smart community.
Any additional comments from the board on the 5-year forecast? Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bitter? Aye. Mr. Conover?
Aye.
Mr. Ballant?
Aye.
And Dr. Stuger?
Aye.
5-year forecast is approved. I need a motion for the approval of the personnel consent agenda, which includes addendum 1FH, 2QR, 3B, C, and D, and item number 5, the Montgomery teachers.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Dr. Stuger?
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter? Aye. Mr. Ballant?
Aye.
And Mr. Conover?
Aye.
Personnel consent agenda passes. Moving on to other Board of Education business, Mrs. Bitter, a legislative liaison update.
Thank you, Mrs. Weber, for your call to Senator Blessing. Thank you for that update. That's good news. I'm glad to hear that meeting went well. So I am going to just I'll try to keep this brief. My notes are longer, but I'm going to keep it brief. The Ohio House, as you all know, passed House Bill 33, which is the biennial budget for fiscal year 24 and 25, and they moved it on, and now it's in the Ohio Senate. The House budget bill continued the implementation of the fair funding plan, and they also included an update to the base cost inputs from fiscal year 22 to keep it, which is what we want. The budget bill did not include House Bill 11, which is the backpack scholarship program, which would have provided universal vouchers. So that's positive. However, they did increase the amount. They proposed that it'd be that it would expand. The current version would expand to 450% of the federal poverty level, which is around $135,000 for a family of 4. So that could impact our district should that go forward. Also in their budget, the House, and now the Senate has to decide if they're going to keep that. They included an increase in the amount for the John Peterson Special Needs Scholarship, raising its funding cap from $27,000 per student to $30,000 per student. The Ohio Senate will now look at it. They've been having testimony since April, and they are expected to pass this sometime either later on this month or in mid-June by the latest. I just want to give you a general update from different education groups that have been talking about fair school funding and their advocacy. The Ohio School Board Association, the Ohio Association of Elementary School Administrators, Buckeye Association of School Administrators, and Ohio Association of School Business Officials has really been advocating for fair school funding plan. So hopefully that just by collectively all the different school districts and the different administrators throughout the state, letting the senators know that this is very important for school funding to maintain that their fundings, those fair funding levels at fiscal year 22 will actually do the trick and it will get in there and the governor will sign it based off that. Just other notable requests that this group of education groups also advocated for. They advocated for more information and help understanding economically and disadvantaged student costs to school district to make sure that that's included. They also advocated that there not be a voucher expansion, and they advocated for transportation costs and for some of the challenges that school districts are facing, finding drivers and rising fuel costs, et cetera. So I think it's a group effort. At one of our PTO meetings that we attended, I think I was with you, Mr. Ballant. Somebody, people they're very concerned about the fair school funding and voucher programs. And I think they even asked us if school districts are advocating and administrators are advocating, and the answer is yes. I think that we all are. So this is a positive movement. That is not my phone. That's all I've got for you. My alarm clock went off to tell me to stop.
Legislative update finished.
Yes, that is complete.
Moving on to our Business Advisory Council update. We recently held our last meeting of the year. Talked about the career exploration program that's just starting at the high school. They've had a couple guest speakers. They're starting small on purpose and looking to expand the program, forming a steering committee over the summer, as well as looking for future guest speakers and then developing, hopefully by next year, job shadowing and interns. We had a great discussion with the businesses and the municipalities on how they are currently working to attract minority candidates. And we are looking for new members for the 23-24 school year. So if any board member has recommendations for the Business Advisory Committee, please get their names to me. Thank you. Sycamore Advisory Commission report, Dr. Steger.
Okay, I wrote a lot out, so I will cut it down a little bit. So, we had our meeting last week, and this year we are saying goodbye to our chairperson who's in the audience, so everyone able to say thank you to Margot Rapp, who's up in the audience, who's been with staff for a number of years, and we're grateful to get here for 6 years. She's going to be stepping down, so you'll see that on the legislative commission officer. So can we all say a good thank you to her right now?
Thank you, Mrs. Rapp. Thank you so much.
So I do have it in there. We also have a number of members who are moving off track, and because of the numbers, we've been able to move forward with a number of mini studies that are important to the district, which we've been using in the discussion. The last one we had, the last presentation we had, which we will probably be going forward with the presentation to the board this summer or this fall, is the baking epidemic committee. It was looking into what's going on in the school. They want to make it very clear that we all need to look at vaping as an addiction. It is not, necessarily a behavioral issue, but it's an addiction issue for the children, and we included the roles of social media, stress, anxiety, depression. Oh, it's off. Thank you. And the different flavors that were involved with those, and then the vape industry is not. They want to make sure that the vape industry is not regulated. And some kids are using these to self-soothe or even keep themselves awake. And one thing that I think a lot of people were surprised to learn from the committee was that one cartridge contains 100 to 1,000 cigarettes worth of nicotine in one cartridge. So if you want to look at an addiction, that's fast. It goes right into your lungs and it harms people. Mr. Sandor did a great it was a very detailed assessment of his own day, and including if he has to take away any moment of his day to respond to an alarm in a bathroom, it's going to take away from parent emails, time with children, subbing for a fellow teacher in the building if he's needed. So the takeaways from this were they were asking for the district to help with parent education. They would like a policy change that's not just a disciplinary action, but also we need to look at it from an addiction standpoint. How can we help children? And then we also need to work with it with existing programs or initiatives like PBIS. So that was the big takeaway. And I'm going to stop right there because we've got some time, but on the next few things on the agenda are us voting for new advisory commission officers and the members at large, as well as the bylaws, which thank you, Mrs. Weber, for being involved with the committee with the bylaws. So that is all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Steger.
Can I ask a quick question about the vaping? What grades are students vaping? Are they vaping in the fifth and sixth grade as well?
The high school, junior high school and green school.
Okay, so it's everywhere. And
We're not seeing it a ton at the first grade. Like, I will say like maybe 2 incidents a year
okay,
in the 5-6 grade band. It's 7 through 12 problem.
Which is probably a child who got something from an older sibling or a parent.
We did have one elementary school that did have a student that had a vape on his or her person. So
Thank you very much. I need a motion for the approval of the Sycamore Advisory Commission bylaws. So moved.
second,
Mrs. Weber, please call the roll.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Mrs. Ritter. Aye. Dr. Steger. Aye. And Mr. Ballant.
Aye. Bylaws are approved. I need a motion for the approval of the Sycamore Advisory Commission officers.
So moved.
second,
Mrs. Weber.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Mr. Bitter. Mrs. Bitter.
Aye.
Dr. Steger. Aye. Mr. Ballant.
Aye. Officers are approved. I need a motion for the approval of the Sycamore Advisory Commission members at large organization representatives.
So moved.
second,
Mrs. Weber.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter.
Aye.
Dr. Steger.
Aye.
Mr. Ballant.
Aye. Members are approved. Any additional comments from the board? We will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
thank you.